Chapter 330. Many people started to mutter in their hearts. What kind of background did this newbie have? It was obvious that Huan Yu wanted to groom her. She had not even debuted, but she was already chosen by a famous director and was given the role of the female lead. Lin Fengtian was a famous gold medal director in the entertainment industry. He had always been strict, but he actually chose an unknown newbie? In the history of the entertainment industry, there was no example of Lin Fengtian's movies not being popular. Many people racked their brains and still could not get a supporting role in his movies. Not only that, many celebrities were not qualified to be invited to Huan Yu's annual cocktail party. Not only did Yun Shixia receive Gu Xingzi's invitation, she even became Gu Xingzi's female companion. Putting all these aside, being able to directly sign a contract with Huan Yu's headquarters made many people so jealous that they gritted their teeth. What was even more frightening was that she had an ace manager behind her. It would be a miracle if this newbie did not become popular. Among the newbies, many were jealous of her. She had not even debuted, but she already had such excellent resources. They could not wait to be jealous. Therefore, Yun Shixia was inevitably ignored and questioned in the training class. However, she did not care at all. She had more opportunities than others. Any normal person would look at her with suspicion and jealousy. However, it was because of this that she had to work harder than them and cherish this opportunity more than they did. Strength was the best proof for her. After a week of high-intensity training, Yun Shixia was completely exhausted. She was very tired, much more tired than when she went to work. Her body could not bear the burden. Even so, her willpower was considered to be the strongest in the entire class. Many people could not persevere in the face of hellish high-intensity training. The trainees in the training class were cut in batches. In less than a week, half of the trainees were cut. On this day, after the training class, Yun Shixia walked to the lounge. She only felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. She was still dizzy. The excessive pressure caused her to be unable to sleep well for several days. She muddle-headedly held onto the wall and groped her way to her lounge. She thought to herself, training classes have been packed to the brim for a month. Now, it's only been a week, and she can't take it anymore. What will she do for the rest of the classes? Leaning against the door, Yun Shixia touched the key with one hand. Under Qin Zhou's special care, she had her own private lounge. She turned on her phone and saw a missed call. She stared at Yu Yu's name on the screen and couldn't help but reveal a gentle smile. For the next few days, the school was holding an international children's summer camp in Minghai City. She was not free, so Yun Yecheng accompanied the little lad. Just as he was about to dial the number back, his fingertips suddenly paused. This little guy should be having a good time right now. Now that she was busy with work, she rarely had time to go out with the little guy. It was rare for the school to hold a summer camp, so she would let him have a good time. Yun Shixia closed her phone. Forget it, it's better not to disturb him. Opening the door, the room was brightly lit. She had just walked in when she heard a devilish voice leisurely say, "Welcome, back, with pleasure." Yun Shixia could not help but be shocked. Before she could react, she was on high alert. She turned around and looked outside the door nervously for a while before she slammed the door shut and locked it. Chapter 331. Mu Yaja, what are you doing here? Wasn't he supposed to be busy? On the sofa, Mu Yaja elegantly propped up his upper body. The lapel of his black shirt was slightly open, revealing his well-defined chest. He was wearing a pair of handsome, slim-fit trousers and a pair of expensive handmade leather shoes. His long legs were crossed elegantly, giving him a noble and unruly posture. She had to admit that his figure was very muscular and sexy. Every part of his body was perfect and well-proportioned. A silver necklace dangled between his collarbones, complementing his fair and flawless skin. It was very charming. He had flown to America a while ago and had just gotten off the plane today. His face was weary, and his black hair was slightly messy. It covered his sharp eyebrows and intertwined with his long and thick eyelashes, casting a shadow on his eyelids. Mu Yaja held a cigarette between his fingers, and the room was filled with a faint aroma. Yun Shishir stood rooted to the ground and asked with a frown, "How did you get in? And, how did you know that this is my resting room? Didn't anyone stop you?" This passageway was blocked by the security guards and was heavily guarded. How did he get in so quietly? Stop me? Mu Yaja found her words very interesting. Huanyu Tower is mine, and it's huge. Who dares to stop me? His words did make some sense. Aren't you afraid of being photographed by the reporters? Yun Shishir said helplessly. What a stiff tone. It sounds very uncomfortable. Mu Yaja smiled devilishly. He put out the cigarette and hooked his finger at her. Shishir, come here. Shishir, this was the first time he had called her by her name. His tone was devilishly charming with a hint of gentleness. Yun Shishir was caught off guard, and a part of her heart collapsed. Come here. Seeing that she wasn't moving, a hint of displeasure appeared on his face. Yun Shishir could faintly smell danger. She shook her head and took a few steps back. With her back against the door, she said gloomily, I'm not going over. Mu Yaja curled his lips, his thick eyelashes hiding the mischievous smile in his eyes. Why? She also has a little temper. No, Mr. CEO, how would I dare to be angry with you? Mu Yaja's lips curled into a smile. Come here, then. She turned her face away awkwardly and stood still. Mu Yaja found her awkward look very interesting. You know what? The more you act like this, the harder it is for me to restrain myself. Yun Shishir blushed. The ambiguous meaning in his words was obvious. She immediately frowned and said, Are you a beast? I'm hungry. Mu Yaja's tongue curled into a frivolous smile. A hungry man is very scary. Don't try to arouse my desire to conquer. Then, he leaned forward calmly. Good girl, come here. Hey, do you want me to go over, or do you want to come over? Leaning back in his chair, Mu Yaja lowered his gaze and answered, 3, 2, 1, Mu Yaja pretended to get up. Yun Shishir couldn't help but shudder when she saw this. She quickly braced herself and walked over. The man was leaning on the sofa with one hand supporting his head and a mischievous smile on his lips. Mu Yaja, you. Ah. Chapter 332. Before she could finish her sentence, Mu Yaja grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his embrace. His slender fingers lifted her chin. The man couldn't wait any longer as he lowered his eyes and kissed her lips. His body missed her a little. In the past few days in America, he had missed this woman all the time. He missed her shy and coquettish look. He missed the way she glared at him angrily. Even more, he missed the way she shyly waited under his body. Extremely charming. He missed her as if he had been poisoned by some kind of parasite. It was as if only she could cure the poison in his body. She was his poison, and also his antidote. The tip of his tongue hooked into her slightly opened lips and danced around her sweetness. The faint fragrance of smoke lingered between his lips and teeth. Yun Shishir's heartbeat suddenly sped up, and a flirtatious blush surfaced on her cheeks. At first, the kiss had a hint of attacking a city. He pressed on step by step, and she retreated step by step. However, gradually, his kiss slowly became gentle. Mu Yaja supported his body with one hand, and the other domineeringly wrapped around her waist. He got up slightly and lazily leaned against the sofa. He hugged her to sit on his knees, and with one hand holding onto her thighs, his right hand tightly wrapped around the back of her neck. Using this position, he deepened the kiss. The tip of his tongue gently traced the shape of his lips. The kiss was soft, gentle, and soft, but it also seemed to have a faint trace of electricity. A trembling numbness instantly spread throughout her limbs and bones, and her body unconsciously began to heat up. The instinctive reaction hidden deep in her heart was easily dug out by him. Yunshi's breathing lost its stability and became slightly rough. Yilan's kiss always had a terrifying magical power that could easily ignite the passion in the depths of her heart. Mu Yaja smiled mischievously. His left hand evilly lifted her lapel and casually untied her knot. His ice-cold fingertips seemed to brush across her collarbone and skin. Yunshi was shocked and reached out to hold his hand. "What are you doing?" "Eat you. I don't understand you." Yunshi blushed as if she didn't understand the hidden meaning in his words. Mu Yaja smiled and held her fingertips, guiding them to his chest. When her fingertips touched his buttons, Yunshi's face immediately turned red. He had become more sensitive after not touching her for a few days. It was just a deep kiss, but her face was completely red, all the way to her ears. It was kind of cute. Mu Yaja said, "I didn't say that I was hungry." "Woman, feed me. If you're hungry, let's go eat." Yunshi was both embarrassed and annoyed. "Woman, do you really not understand, or are you pretending not to understand?" Mu Yaja licked and kissed the corner of her lips. The tip of his nose pressed against hers as he said softly, "Eat you, don't you understand?" This time, he understood. But, Yunshi sucked in a deep breath of cold air. She swallowed hard and pressed her hands against his chest. "No. No? Why can't I sleep with my woman? Why was this man so domineering?" Yunshi was a little angry. She was extremely tired now and wanted to eat a full meal. Then, she wanted to take a short and comfortable nap to replenish her sleep. But, heaven didn't fulfill her wish. Mu Yaja looked at her evasive gaze and felt a little unhappy. Thus, he pinched her chin and covered her mouth with his thin lips again. Chapter 333. Pressing against her soft lips, he said in a low voice, "I missed you." His tone was filled with rare tenderness. It was a poison that no woman could resist. It was as if it had seeped into her bones and numbed all her nerves. At that moment, Yunshi was powerless to resist. Hugging her waist, he turned her around and pressed her against the corner of the sofa as he slowly inched closer to her. She didn't even have the slightest leeway before her lips were softly sealed by his again. This time, the kiss wasn't as aggressive as before. His originally cold lips had some warmth under her tenderness. The deep kiss filled her mouth. He was no longer satisfied with just tasting her. He always craved more for her. She was like a mysterious treasure that tempted people to explore. The man's heavy body covered her body. She was so thin that she couldn't bear such strength. Her small hands pushed hard. Under the force, her lips and teeth tightened, blocking all his attacks outside the door. Mu Yaja reached out and pinched her chin. His fingertips pressed hard against her teeth. She felt the pain and couldn't help but open her mouth to compromise. A refreshing breath rushed in, covering her sweet lips and tongue, invading her. His attacks were gradual. Her beauty was hard to find words to describe in the world. Mu Yaja held the back of her neck. His slender fingers slowly entered her hair. He suddenly kissed her fiercely. In his passion, he couldn't wait to integrate her into his bones and blood. Knock knock knock, someone suddenly knocked on the door. Yunshi's eyes suddenly opened and she woke up in an instant. Her fading rationality gradually came back. She turned her head in shock and heard a woman's voice outside the door. "Shir, are you there?" The person outside the door was actually a newcomer from the same batch as her, Jianghu. She was 23 years old and came to Beijing alone when she was in her teens. After struggling for several years, she won the opportunity to sign a contract with Huanyu Pictures. She was a newcomer with good qualifications. If she could achieve good results in this training, she could sign a contract with Huanyu Pictures and officially debut. Without waiting for her response, the woman turned the doorknob but found that it would not budge. Xianxia, I left my jacket in your lounge. Come in and get it. Are you there? Why is the door locked? The air was filled with a soft and charming aura that flowed ambiguously. He did not stop at all because of the commotion outside the door. She couldn't help but feel a little nervous. She pushed Wuxia, who was on top of her, but the man didn't react at all. He ignored the disturbance outside the door. She could not help but feel a little anxious at his indifference. Wuxia, stop, Wuxia smirked. What should I do? I can't stop. Xianxia struggled to turn around, but was trapped in his arms domineeringly. Wuxia licked her earlobe and whispered, let her go. Xianxia, are you there? The person outside the door was a little impatient. Wuxia's flirtatious gaze became more dangerous as his eyes slowly narrowed. Xianxia was scared witless. She hurriedly said loudly, I'm not free now. Xianxia regretted speaking just now. Her voice was misty and trembling, full of suppressed lust. How embarrassing. Xianxia, your voice sounds weird. Are you not feeling well? Chapter 334. Wuxia gave a strange smile as his slender index finger pinched her sensitive spot. She let out a soft moan and hurriedly covered her mouth with her hand as she glared fiercely at him. Did this guy want to see her embarrass herself? Xianxia? What's wrong with you? The person outside pushed the door. Xianxia's nerves were on the verge of breaking. Even her breathing became a little hurried. Answer her. Wuxia smiled evilly and the tip of his tongue traced the kiss mark on her neck that hadn't faded yet. That was the seal he had left on her body. Xianxia didn't know what to say and was furious. This man was obviously trying to embarrass her. Under his attack, half of her mind was in a rational state, and the other half was on the verge of collapse. I'm fine. Your coat, I'll send it to you later. There was suddenly no sound outside the door. The long silence made her extremely nervous. However, the man found her nervous look interesting, so he didn't stop attacking her and kept messing around with her body. In the end, Xianxia flew into a rage out of humiliation and wanted to stop this tense invasion. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain on her lips. Wuxia's handsome eyes suddenly opened and a trace of scarlet flashed across his eyes. When he realized that she had bitten his lips, the anger in his eyes disappeared in a moment. In the pain, his lips quickly became numb, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he deepened the kiss with the beautiful sweet taste. The blood on his lips couldn't stop flowing. The tip of his tongue outlined, like a bloodthirsty vampire, evil and charming. He passed the sweet and fishy taste into her mouth. He wanted to let her have a taste of it. In the lounge, there was endless romance. Xianxia's tongue touched a trace of sweetness and a white light suddenly exploded in her mind. Wuxia continued kissing and plundering her passionately. However, the person under him gradually stopped responding. Wuxia slowly raised his head, only to see the person in his arms looking up at him with a pale face. Her eyes were fixed on his face. There were traces of blood on his lips. It was the blood from when she had bitten his lips. Coupled with her pale lips, it was strangely seductive. His eyes dimmed and he reached out to touch her lips, wiping away the blood on her lips. She opened her mouth and bit his finger. She left a row of deep teeth marks. Like an enraged cat, she bit fiercely without any mercy. Wuxia didn't move at all. He slowly got up and seemed to have lost interest. He casually took the suit jacket on the side, opened the door, and walked out. Outside the door, Jianghu did not leave. Instead, she waited for Xianxia at the door. Instead, she bumped into him unexpectedly. Jianghu was stunned. With her status, she naturally didn't know who he was. Her first impression was that this man was too handsome. And he was unusually young. He was tall and had an extraordinary aura. His handsome face was like that of a god. It was difficult to measure his handsomeness with words. Who was he? Why did he walk out of Yunshi's lounge? Jiang Yutong's sharp eyes noticed that there was a wound on his lips, and blood was oozing out. Chapter 335. Mu Yaja frowned slightly. Seeing her gaze on his lips, he subconsciously licked the blood stain with his tongue. Without a word, he turned around and left. Arrogant, cold, and extraordinarily handsome. Judging from his attire, he must be a famous person who was either rich or respectable. Jiang Yutong could not believe it. She had thought that such a man would only appear in her imagination. She did not expect to see him with her own eyes. Hence, she stood there in a daze for a long time. She felt like she was in a dream. But why did he walk out of Yunshi's lounge? Could it be that there was some unknown relationship between them? Jiang Yutong started to make wild guesses. Although she appeared to be amiable and friendly toward Yunshi on the surface, everyone had their own selfish motives, didn't they? Although Yunshi had not officially debuted, she was already very famous. Not to mention the newcomers, even the celebrities had a lot of doubts and suspicions about her. There were rumors that Yunshi was able to appear in Lin Fengtian's film without debuting because she had a sugar daddy behind her. Otherwise, how could a newbie with no fame like her appear in Lin Fengtian's film? That was not all. What right did she have to be invited to Huanyu's annual cocktail party? Even Yang Mi and Tang Yu had to rely on their connections to get in. What right did she have? She was even Gu Xingza's female companion. She heard that Gu Xingza had personally invited her. Was that possible? Gu Xingza was famous in the industry for being arrogant. Would he personally invite a newbie with no fame to be his female companion? Was it because of her looks? However, in the entertainment industry, there were many talented and beautiful women. There was no lack of different styles. Some were sexy and hot, some were outstanding beauties, and some were pure and innocent. The competition was cruel and the battles were fierce. That was not all. If she made use of this movie's female lead and the cocktail party to make a name for herself, wouldn't it be easy for her to sign a contract and debut? With such excellent resources, who would believe that she did not have a sugar daddy behind her? However, Yunshi was completely wronged on this point. Lin Fengtian had personally chosen her to be the female lead because Yunshi's temperament matched his image of the female lead. Even the picky Gu Xingza thought that she was the best choice for the female lead. Contrary to what they had guessed, the investors had already decided on the female lead. However, Lin Fengtian was adamantly against it. He would rather not film the film than let the investors force a candidate into the role. However, there was a saying that people's gossip was a fearful thing. As a result, these presumptuous remarks had already spread in private. Jiang Yutong was a little skeptical at first. But now, she believed it all. She believed that Yunshi had a sugar daddy. Could it be that the man just now was her sugar daddy? Why? 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 A series of questions flashed through Jiang Yutong's mind. Why did she drop out of school and come to the capital in her teens? As a young girl with an acting dream, she had spent a few years to get to where she was today, step by step, from being naive at the beginning to having the opportunity to sign a contract. Why was it that someone was able to beat her to it, and even, effortlessly obtain a better result than her? On what basis? Therefore, she was more or less jealous of her. But this was human nature. Chapter 336. Hence, when Yunshi walked out of the restroom with her coat, the way Jiang Yutong looked at her was different from usual. Yunshi bumped into her when she walked out of the restroom. She was startled by her sudden appearance. Yutong. Shirsher, why have you been in there for so long? What on earth are you doing? Why didn't you respond after knocking on the door for such a long time? Jiang Yutong came back to her senses and immediately cleaned up the messy emotions on her face. She walked in front of her with a smile and took the coat from her hand. I didn't do anything. She smiled, but she did not elaborate on the matter and simply brushed it off. She didn't know how long Jianghu had been standing at the door, nor did she know how much she had heard of what had happened in the room. She only knew that she couldn't explain too much, otherwise, it would only make things worse. But, I think I saw a man walking out of your restroom just now. Your door was locked from the inside. Is there something going on between you two? Jianghu pretended to be very nosy and wanted to know more about it. Unspoken was a little anxious. She hated Wuxia's casual behavior. It was as if he was the supreme ruler, as if all living beings were his playthings and should be ruled by him. He suddenly appeared in her resting room and did not seem to be afraid of the media reporters who were lurking in Huanyu Tower to take photos. Saying strange things to her out of the blue that disturbed her mind, he suddenly wanted her. He wanted her all the time, regardless of the occasion. He didn't care about her feelings at all. Now, someone saw it and wanted her to explain. But how could she explain it? Seeing that she was silent, Jianghu became more curious. It seemed that she wouldn't give up until she gave her a reasonable explanation. She was definitely going to pester her. But the interesting thing was she really her friend? They had known each other for less than 10 days. They were in the same training class. They had seen each other face to face and exchanged smiles occasionally. Was it necessary for her to explain so much to her? Jianghu saw that she didn't speak and concluded that there must be something going on between the two of them. Wasn't that inevitable? That man must be one of Unspok's financial backers. After thinking about it, she felt that it was very suspicious. Huanyu Tower's security system was in place. How could a random person sneak into Huanyu Tower? It was a leisurely stroll, as if he was taking a stroll in his own backyard, careless and unconcerned. There must be something fishy going on. This man was either a rich and powerful celebrity, or he was one of Huanyu's higher-ups. There were too many unspoken rules in this industry. The scandal of Tang Yu's sleeping scandal had caused an uproar among the public. They were shocked by the dark rules of the entertainment industry. But in Jianghu's eyes, it was not surprising at all. He had been in this circle for a few years, so what kind of dark side had he not seen? No matter how talented or beautiful a newcomer was, it was impossible for her to become famous for no reason. This industry was all about background and resources. No matter how good her aptitude was, if she didn't have anyone to support her from behind, even if she wanted to become famous, it was just that she had nowhere to go. Chapter 337. There must be someone behind the scenes who pushed her to the top. If she wanted to figure it out, she had to build a good relationship with Unspoken first. Then she could get the man's identity and the ins and outs of the matter from her. How powerful was the person who could make a newcomer popular in such a short time? If it was possible, she might even be able to poach a man from Unspoken and get some resources from him. As for the hidden rules, if she could become popular overnight, she would be willing to do anything. After staying in this circle for a long time, her values were naturally not right. She could not be indifferent to the so-called innocents. After all, she was not young anymore. If she could not make a name for herself, she would never have another chance. Therefore, since she could not force her, she could only play the tender card. With a friendly smile on her face, she lowered her voice and asked, "Sure, the man just now, is he your boyfriend?" "That's not it," she vehemently denied, feeling baffled by his words. Wasn't Jianghu being overly enthusiastic about her matters? What was the relationship between her and Wuxia? Was it her turn to ask? Thinking of this, Unspoken turned and walked to the training room. When Jianghu saw this, she unwillingly followed behind her and said carefully, Sure, maybe you think that I'm the kind of person who can't keep secrets, but I've always treated you as a good friend. Among all the newcomers, you take care of me the best. We are friends, right?" Yun Shishir slowed down her pace. Friends, except for Xiao Shui, she really had no friends. When she was in school, she was a little autistic. In school, girls always liked to gather in small groups. If she could not fit in the group, she would be isolated. What's more, when she was in school, her appearance gradually grew. She was fresh, pure and beautiful. Not only in class, but also many seniors admired her very much. Among them, some of these seniors were the most handsome men in school. They were the Prince Charming in many girls' eyes. Therefore, the hatred was more obvious. Many boys were constantly pursuing her. Every morning when they went to class, their desks would be stuffed with a stack of envelopes. Some of these envelopes contained love letters that were full of sweet nothings, while others contained razor blades and threatening letters sent by some girls. Every time, she threw them away cleanly and didn't open a single one of them. She did not have the throbbing of a girl's youth at all. What she wanted was to get into a good university, then leave the family and be independent outside. Her behavior of throwing away the love letters, in the eyes of outsiders, was arrogant. Most of the boys in school were hot-blooded and cared about their faces. Many boys saw that the girl they passionately pursued threw away the love letters one drawer after drawer, and their admiration turned into anger out of shame. Therefore, not only did the girls give her the cold shoulder, but the boys also ostracized her, isolated her, teased her, and even went overboard. Nobody was willing to be friends with her. It seemed that she did not need a friend. Although she was alone, there was no betrayal, no framing, no trouble, which was very good. But there were many people who pointed at her back and called her a vixen. Li Qin also scolded her, Yun Na also scolded her, and her classmates also scolded her behind her back. She was very confused for a while. She did not know what she did wrong. Chapter 338. She wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what Jiang Yutong was thinking. Jiang Yutong was trying to get information out of her. She wasn't stupid. Why would she tell her? She might look weak, but she wasn't. She stood aloof from worldly affairs. She didn't like to play games, nor did she like to cater to others. If she could get along with someone, she would. If she couldn't, she would never open her heart to them. Shishir, why aren't you saying anything? Are you worried that I'll spill the beans? Jiang Yutong patted her chest when she didn't respond. Hey, don't worry. I won't betray you. With that, Jiang Yutong stood in front of her and made a solemn vow. I swear that if I can't keep your secret, I'll be struck by lightning. It was a vow. She wasn't worried about retribution at all. Yun Shishir looked at her deeply. She suddenly felt a little tired. Why should I tell you about my relationship with him? Yun Shishir was confused. Will it help you in any way? Jiang Yutong paused for a moment and quickly explained, No, I didn't. I'm just worried about you. What are you worried about? Yun Shishir was even more curious. Jiang Yutong touched the back of her head and pretended to be worried. Shishir, you've signed a contract with Huanyu, right? Yes. She had signed a contract. But then? Have you read the terms and conditions of the contract? She replied, Yes, I saw it clearly. Then you should know that it's a breach of contract if you're dating in private. Jiang Yutong said to her in a serious tone. She seemed to be concerned, but in fact, she was trying to scare her. Yun Shishir pretended to be deep in thought. In fact, she was secretly guessing what Jiang Yutong was planning. I heard that it's a serious breach of contract. Not only will you be banned by Huanyu, but you'll also face an astronomical sum of money. You won't be able to pay it back even if you spend your whole life. Jiang Yutong said kindly. Yun Shishir said calmly, It's okay. He's not my boyfriend. Even if it was, so what? The entire Huanyu belonged to Muyaja. However, when Yun Shishir thought about how Muyaja had asked her for a sky-high penalty for breaching the contract, she shuddered. This man seemed to be capable of doing such a thing. If she made him unhappy, he didn't even need to do it himself. He could easily crush her with a single finger. Seeing her suddenly fall silent, he coldly denied it. His tone was decisive and straightforward, without even a trace of hesitation. His face was calm and composed, without any unnaturalness or guilt. It didn't look like he was lying at all. Is he really not her boyfriend? Jiang Yutong thought to herself, that's right. If such a handsome man is my sugar daddy, he's so handsome, rich, and elegant. He's like a model from an idol drama. Many people will be jealous of me if I tell them. Jiang Yutong rolled her eyes. Suddenly, she lowered her voice and whispered carefully in her ear, Sure, that man can't be the mysterious sugar daddy behind you, right? As soon as she finished speaking, Yun Sure raised her head abruptly. Her pair of clear eyes stared fixedly at her as her brows furrowed slightly. She seemed to have seen through Jiang Yutong's intentions. Chapter 339. Jiang Yutong's heart skipped a beat when she saw her reaction. She covered her mouth in shock. She was right. She murmured in disbelief, it can't be true, right? As she spoke, she tugged at Yun Shurshu's sleeve, her eyes burning with excitement. Sure. I heard from them that the reason why you can get so many resources before your debut is because you have a big sugar daddy supporting you. Are those rumors true? No. Yun Shurshu said coldly. Oh, then what's your relationship with me? I asked you a question but you didn't answer me. Do you even consider me as your friend? Jiang Yutong frowned and scolded her impatiently when she saw that she had sealed her mouth so tightly. Yun Shurshu's lips curled up coldly as she retorted, ridiculous. When did we become friends? Why don't I know about it? Jiang Yutong was stunned by her cold question. What, she seemed to be a little lonely because of Yun Shurshu's indifference. She lowered her eyes and sighed absent-mindedly. I thought, we were friends. She murmured, looking aggrieved and sad. She said bitterly, you're so nice to me. I thought you should treat me as a friend. Yun Shurshu was so angry that she laughed. You thought? Your so-called thought is just your wishful thinking. Jiang Yutong was irritated by her straightforward words. Yun Shurshu, what do you mean? You make it sound like I'm coveting something from you. Why do you have to be so sarcastic? You've really hurt my heart. Yun Shurshu's face curled into a sneer as her lips curled into a mocking smile. Jiang Yutong, what answer do you want from me? Jiang Yutong stared at her blankly. She couldn't help but feel that Yun Shurshu was so aggressive. What? I'm asking you now. Why are you silent again? Yun Shurshu's lips curled into a smile. Let me ask for you, then. You want to ask me, I'm just a newcomer, how can I be in Director Lin's film? Jiang Yutong's eyes changed. She nodded silently. Suddenly, she realized something and shook her head. That's not what I meant. Yun Shurshu smirked and took a step closer to her. Then what do you mean? On what basis can I attend Huan Yu's annual cocktail party? What right do I have to be Heavenly King Gu's female companion? What right do I have to sign a contract with Huan Yu when I just debuted? Is it related to the man you saw just now? Isn't that what you want to ask? Yun Shurshu was 1.7 meters tall, while Jiang Yutong was only 1.6 meters tall. The difference in height between them was destined to make Yun Shurshu look down on her. Jiang Yutong stared at her, dumbfounded. She clenched her fists tightly and wanted to say something, but she stopped herself. That was what she wanted to ask, but she had asked it so vaguely. She thought that Yun Shurshu, who looked dull on the surface, would not be shrewd. She did not expect her to see through her thoughts at a glance. Chapter 340. Behind her, Jiang Yutong froze on the spot with a pale face. Her eyes were filled with hatred. She was also embarrassed. Women were creatures that held grudges. Jianghu swore to herself that she would return the humiliation she suffered in front of Unspoken today 100-fold. However, she was a woman of her word. Therefore, when Unspoken stepped into the classroom the next day, she was acutely aware of the crowd's judging, speculating, and questioning gazes landing on her. They were as sharp as arrows, making her feel uncomfortable as if she was being pricked by needles. She raised her head and vaguely saw Jianghu looking at her with a deep expression. She was sitting in the corner, staring at her with a gloomy expression, as if she was very appreciative of her current awkward situation. The murmurs. The murmurs made Unspoken feel as if she had returned to her days as a student. The moment she stepped into the classroom, she was greeted with the same piercing gazes and scrutiny. From head to toe, from the outside to the inside, it was as if they wanted to dig out every corner of her body. Humans were selfish by nature. When they met something better than themselves, they would be envious, jealous, and even want to destroy it. Jianghu was such a woman. Unspoken, on the other hand, preferred peace. She was not overly greedy or ambitious. Most of the time, she just wanted to enjoy the world in peace. She wanted to live and survive peacefully. This kind of peace had accompanied her for almost her entire life. No matter what kind of slander or predicament she faced, she could suppress herself and get through it calmly. This kind of peace might seem lonely or even cold in the eyes of outsiders. However, it was as if her life was destined to be full of misfortune. It was destined to not be peaceful. Unspoken pretended to be calm. She hugged her textbook and sat down in her seat. But her carefree attitude caused even more whispered discussions to arise. Buzzing, 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 it was as if innumerable flies were surrounding her and circling around her, disturbing her to the point that her mind was in turmoil. She looked up slightly and glanced at the indifferent faces following the murmurs. Seeing this, those people quickly lowered their heads and pursed their lips. They felt guilty and did not say a word. However, when Unspoken lowered her head, the murmurs started again, making her feel extremely anxious. This was terrible. There was no need to think about it. Who was the culprit behind this sudden disturbance? Jianghu must have spread some kind of rumor in the classroom to attract those suspicious gazes. The faces of those who were whispering to each other in private gradually became distorted and hideous in her eyes. They were incomparably hideous and ugly. She could no longer pretend to be calm. She pushed the table angrily and stood up, shouting, "Are you done?" Everyone was stunned. No one expected Unspoken, who was usually quiet and even timid, to the point that she was actually angry. For a moment, it was as if the air had frozen. Until Jianghu sneered, "No one is talking about you. What are you thinking? You're deaf, but I'm not." Unspoken retorted with a sneer. Jianghu choked for a moment and was speechless. People who looked easy to bully were not easy to bully. Chapter 341. Suddenly, a voice came from the classroom. "You're the only one who's allowed to do it, but we're not allowed to talk about it." "Who's talking?" Unspoken's cold gaze swept over. "If you're talking to me, please stand up first and let me see who you are. This is the basic courtesy between people. Who's afraid of you? Do you think you're so great just because you have a sugar daddy to rely on?" In the second row, a pretty girl with a ponytail stood up unhappily. "We're talking about you, so what?" Unspoken's eyes narrowed as her lips curled into a cold smirk. Everyone present shuddered inexplicably at this sight. "What are you talking about?" Her voice was very soft and light, but it revealed a sense of coldness. This coldness was not indifferent on the surface, but it was bone-chilling. That ponytailed girl was also a little frightened by her tone and shrunk her shoulders slightly. But when she thought of the dozens of people in the training class who were on the same side as her, she regained some courage and said, "We're talking about how unclean you are and how you use dirty and despicable methods." Unspoken's expression did not change. For example? Do you still need to ask me about what you've done? That girl sneered and said, yesterday, someone saw a man walking out of your lounge. You're the only one using that lounge, and I don't know who gave you the privilege. That man must be your sugar daddy behind the scenes. I say, although you're a newbie, you have so many resources. You obviously relied on the unspoken rules to get to your position. Her words were laced with sticks and spears, aggressive and aggressive. Unspoken said indifferently, a woman's jealousy is really scary. What did you say? I'm jealous of you? That girl slammed the table in exasperation and said angrily, let me tell you, I've reached this step by relying on myself. Unlike some people who don't walk on the bright path and choose to follow the dirty unspoken rules. Unspoken, don't let me get hold of any evidence, or I'll expose you. In a moment of impulse, she said these words. After saying it, that girl suddenly regretted it. Looking at Unspoken's cold and disdainful eyes again, it was as if she was mocking her ignorance and childishness. Do you think everyone is the same as you? What do you mean? Are you as pretty as me? Do you have my acting skills? Do you have my aptitude? Only those who aren't capable need to rely on the unspoken rules. But I don't need to. Suddenly, a few mocking laughter could be heard in the classroom. The girl was so embarrassed that her face flushed red. She pushed her desk away and quickly walked up to Unspoken. Pointing at her, she said, B*TCH, what's the point of only knowing how to sow discord here? Are you saying that I'm not as pretty as you? Do you with your acting skills? Do I have your aptitude? Where do you? I'm too, she said coldly. However, there was no rebuttal in the classroom. Unspoken in terms of aptitude, no one in the class could compare to Unspoken. There was no room for rebuttal. Bitch! That girl flew into a rage out of humiliation and rushed towards Unspoken's face with threatening gestures. Chapter 342. Unspoken reached out and gently wiped the mark on her neck. With a sharp glint in her eyes, she casually picked up a heavy pencil case from the side and smashed it at her face. The pencil case was made of iron. When it hit the girl's forehead, it broke a layer of skin and blood oozed out. No one in the training class expected the situation to go out of control. They were all stunned. The ponytailed girl clutched her forehead in pain and retreated a few steps in a sorry state. Looking at the bloodstain on her hand, her face flushed red in an instant. Feeling wronged and unbearable, her eyes reddened. Losing her rationality, she picked up a stool from the side and hurled it at Unspoken. There were a few exclamations and attempts to dissuade her. However, her movements were too fast. There was no time to stop her. In the blink of an eye, the stool hit Unspoken. Unspoken couldn't dodge in time and was hit by the stool. She staggered and fell to the ground. At the same time, a thunderous roar came from the door. What are you doing? Everyone looked over and saw the deputy artistic director, Zheng Yun, standing at the door angrily. His eyes were fixed on the stool in the ponytailed girl's hand. The veins on his forehead were bulging. What surprised everyone even more was that Huanyu Entertainment's top manager, Qin Zhou, was standing behind him. Beside him was the famous Heavenly King, Gu Xingzi. The newcomer training class would usually invite famous artists to teach the newcomers. In the past, Gu Xingzi never participated in the newcomer training class. Even when Ji Yanluo personally invited him, Gu Xingzi dismissed him with a look of disinterest. This time, he didn't know what possessed him, but he actually said that he wanted to come with Qin Zhou to the newcomer training class. Qin Zhou was one of the instructors of the newcomer training class. He cursed in his heart. This guy just came back from Milan Fashion Week. When he got off the plane, he found out that Unspoken was in the newcomer training class. He took the initiative to come and listen to how he teaches the newcomers. Listen to his lecture? Who are you kidding? He's obviously worried about a certain woman. However, before they could enter the classroom, they heard the commotion from afar and hurried over. Obviously, they had clearly seen the scene in the classroom just now. The ponytailed girl didn't expect them to suddenly appear. She only cursed in her heart. She was so impulsive that she forgot where she was. She hurriedly put down the weapon in her hand and stood there helplessly. Her face was in a daze, and she didn't dare to believe what she had done when she lost her mind. "What are you doing?" Zheng Yun stepped forward, and just as he was about to lash out, a light breeze blew past him. When everyone came back to their senses, they saw that Gu Xingze had actually walked to Yun Shishir's side with a nervous expression. He bent down slightly and crouched down, holding up her wrist with some heartache. Earlier when that young lady had swung the stool towards her, she had instinctively stretched out her arm to block it. On her pure white arm, a thick bruise had instantly appeared. In Gu Xingze's eyes, he couldn't hide the pain in his heart. He carefully touched the wound, causing Yun Shishir to frown. "Does it hurt?" he asked nervously. Yun Shishir shook her head and gritted her teeth. "It doesn't hurt." "You're still saying it doesn't hurt?" Gu Xingze knew her well. No matter how painful it was, she would try her best to endure it. Seeing the cold sweat on her forehead oozing uncontrollably, Gu Xingze suddenly raised his head. A dangerous glint flashed across his cold eyes. "Who hurt you?" There was a strange silence in the classroom. The dead silence was suffocating. Chapter 343. Who hurt her? He was at the back of the group, so he did not see what happened just now. When he stood at the door, Yun Shishir had already fallen to the ground. Beside her, a ponytailed girl was holding a stool in her hand, standing there in a daze. There was a strange silence in the classroom. Everyone was frozen in place, and no one dared to make a sound. This was the first time they saw Gu Xingze's real face. In the past, they mostly saw the image of the Heavenly King on the television screen. Sometimes he was arrogant, sometimes he was cold, and sometimes he was gentle. This was everyone's first time seeing Gu Xingze's real face. Compared to his image on the screen, he was more noble and handsome, as if he was born naturally. However, at this moment, his body exuded a bone-chilling coldness. His eyes were cold and terrifying. It was as if he could kill someone with a single glance. No one dared to move, or even make a sound. Even the sound of their breathing was carried out quietly, for fear of angering the man in front of them. Who hurt her? Gu Xingze questioned her coldly again. His powerful voice reverberated in the huge classroom, numbing everyone's nerves. Someone pointed weakly at the ponytailed girl standing by the podium and whispered, It's Lu Yi." Whoosh, everyone's gaze immediately fell on Lu Yi's body. Lu Yi was so shocked that she took a step back. Her back was against the blackboard, and she could not avoid it for a moment. Her shoulders trembled, and she finally mustered up the courage to argue, "It's not me, it's Yun Shishir, she was the one who attacked me first." As she spoke, as if she was grasping at a thin life-saving straw, she kept showing Gu Xingze the wound on her forehead that was still bleeding. She said pitifully, "Look, she hit me and left this. She hit me first, so I hit her back. I was just defending myself." No one spoke, and no one testified. At this moment, everyone remained silent, and no one dared to speak. In fact, no one saw that it was Yun Shishir who made the first move. Instead, it was Lu Yi who made the first move and hurt Yun Shishir. Then, Yun Shishir fought back. Every training room was equipped with surveillance cameras. Once they checked the records, the truth would be revealed. Therefore, no one dared to get involved in this mess. Jianghu was also stunned, completely dumbfounded. Like many young girls, she had a Prince Charming in her heart. Gu Xingze had been in the entertainment industry for many years. With his handsome appearance and solid acting skills, he had captured a considerable number of fans, and Jianghu was one of them. She deeply admired Gu Xingze. He was the only national idol in her heart. Although there were many new stars in the entertainment industry, no one could replace Gu Xing's position. However, at this moment, she saw the man of her dreams hugging Yunshishi's shoulders lovingly. His eyes were filled with tenderness as he inquired about her well-being. The doting look in his eyes could hardly be concealed as it overflowed like a river. She stared at him, dumbfounded. Her heart was filled with mixed feelings. Bitterness, jealousy, and most of all, jealousy. Jealousy, how could she not be jealous? If Gu Xingzi could speak to her gently, she would be so happy that she would go crazy. But the idol in her heart was holding another woman, and this woman was the one she hated the most. Why? Chapter 344. Why was it Yunshishi? She wished that the person lying in his arms right now was her, not Yunshishi, who had used underhanded means to climb up the social ladder. Gu Xingzi raised his head coldly and glared at Lu Yi expressionlessly. He suddenly said coldly, Huanyu Entertainment will not sign a contract with a trainee who causes trouble. Everyone was in an uproar as soon as he finished speaking. Gu Xingzi's short sentence completely cut off Lu Yi's path to stardom. Gu Xingzi was one of the major shareholders of Huanyu Entertainment. He held 1/5 of Huanyu's shares, so his orders were naturally powerful. It was not inferior to a ban order. This huge Huanyu corporation could be considered half of his world. If he wanted to expel a trainee, it was just a matter of moving his mouth. It was not difficult. However, Lu Yi had spent a lot of effort to get into Huanyu's training class. This opportunity was very precious. If she missed it, there would not be a second time. If she could successfully graduate from the training class, she would be able to debut. Debut, how many people dreamed of it? But he had removed her from the class with a simple sentence. This meant that she would be permanently frozen in Huanyu. That was too cruel. Yunshishi's eyes flashed slightly. Her gaze fell on the helpless Lu Yi, but she did not say anything. Lu Yi opened her mouth in shock. Her eyes were filled with fear and shock. What? What do you mean? Please get out. You have lost the right to sign a contract and debut. Gu Xingzi's thin lips parted slightly. His tone was frosty. Everyone was stunned. Including Jianghu. She was Gu Xingzi's hardcore fan, so she knew that as a shareholder of Huanyu, he had a lot of power in his hands. But she did not expect that he would ban someone for Yunshishi. The training class was silent for a long time. Gu Xingzi didn't say anything else. He bent down and carefully pulled Yunshishi into his arms, lifting her up easily. His every movement was so careful, as if he was afraid of hurting her, as if he was treating an extremely fragile treasure. Lu Yi said unwillingly, Heavenly King Gu, I'm your fan. In my heart, only a noble and elegant woman is worthy of your status. This woman is not worthy of you. Gu Xingzi ignored her indifferently and was about to leave the classroom with Yunshishi in his arms. Lu Yi rushed forward and grabbed his arm. Don't you know? She relied on the unspoken rules to get to her position. Let go, he warned in a cold voice. His cold gaze was like a sharp sword, shooting at the back of her hand. Lu Yi was frightened by his gaze and took a step back. However, she finally gathered her courage and cried, Since you want to fire me, then please give me a satisfactory explanation. Yunshishi is also a student of the training class. She has already signed a contract with Huanyu. I remember that the contract states very clearly. During the contract, she can't be in a relationship. Otherwise, it's a breach of contract. Yesterday, someone saw a man entering and leaving her lounge. She obviously relied on dirty means to get to her position. Why does she have special treatment? Shut up. Lu Yi did not care about his warning. If she lost the right to sign a contract, Yunshishi would not have an easy time either. Chapter 345. This has nothing to do with you. Gu Xingzi could not be bothered to listen to her explanation and left with Yunshishi in his arms. Qin Zhou's expression changed slightly when he saw Gu Xingze leave. He instructed Zheng Yun to tidy up the situation and left in a hurry. Gu Xingze brought Yun Shishir to his studio on the 30th floor of Huanyu Tower. Gu Xingze's studio occupied a total of 500 square meters of floor space. The entire floor was his world. When the elevator door opened, a simple yet luxurious living room came into view. The private doctor was already waiting in the living room. Qin Zhou had hurriedly contacted the private doctor in Huanyu Tower just now. Gu Xingze placed Yun Shishir on the single bed behind the screen and turned around. "Come and take a look at her." The doctor observed Gu Xingze's expression and saw how nervous he was. He knew how important this woman was to him, so he did not dare to neglect her. Yun Shishir allowed the private doctor to examine her and concluded that it was just a light bruise. After some simple treatment, she would recover in a few days. Gu Xingze's stiff and cold expression finally relaxed. "Thank you, Gu Xingze," Yun Shishir said gratefully from the bottom of her heart. She did not mention a word about what happened in the classroom just now. Qin Zhou saw that Yun Shishir was fine. He was a discerning person, so he quickly left with the doctor. Bang! The elevator door closed and the living room fell silent. Gu Xingze slowly sat on the side of the bed and looked up at her. He asked softly, "Does it hurt?" His expression was careful, as if she was a precious and fragile object in his eyes. If he did not take good care of her, she would break easily. Yun Shishir shook her head. "It doesn't hurt anymore. You're putting on a brave front." Gu Xingze lowered his eyes and looked a little helpless. "I used my hand to block it. I'm not injured anywhere else. It's just a light bruise on my arm. It will be fine after some time," said Yun Shishir. After she finished speaking, there was a long silence. It was so quiet that it felt a little awkward. Both of them had their own thoughts and did not speak to each other. Just as he was about to speak, Qin Zhou suddenly called. He immediately looked a little impatient. He picked up the phone and said coldly, "You better have something urgent." Qin Zhou's lips twitched. "It's like this. Ji Lin wants to meet you for dinner. Bring Yun Shishir." "I'm not going. Her arm was injured. How could she go? It's about the movie. Let's meet another day." "I can't. The producers and investors are all there. Your brother is there too." "Gu, could it be because of Yang Shoucheng?" Gu Xingze was slightly stunned. He was absent-minded for a moment. Then, he hung up the phone and stood up. "You rest here first." Yun Shishir quickly stood up as well. "It's okay. I can go with you." Her hearing was very good. Gu Xingze did not avoid her when he answered the phone. She could vaguely hear that Qin Zhou wanted her to go too. Gu Xingze looked at her helplessly. His eyes were filled with tenderness and heartache. "Be a good girl." Although it was a short word, his face was overflowing with love and affection. It made it impossible for her to resist. Gu Jinglian was an extremely dangerous person. He did not want Yun Shishir to appear in an event where he was present. Yun Shishir compromised. "Okay." Gu Xingze was relieved. However, just as he was about to turn and leave, Yun Shishir quickly followed him and gently tugged at the corner of his shirt. "I'd better go with you. What if it's something important?" Gu Xingze pondered for a moment and finally nodded. "Okay, then you listen to my arrangements." Chapter 346. At night, the wind was bone-chilling. The location of the appointment was Palace Private Clubhouse. Palace Private Clubhouse was located in the bustling Longchuan Manor. The scenery was unique and it was far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It was a rare and peaceful place. 100 years ago, this place was densely packed with aristocratic mansions. The Gu family, which had 100 years of history, was also from an aristocratic family. With the passing of time, this piece of land had become the most desired and unattainable place for the common people in the capital. However, on this piece of land where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, the Gu family's old mansion occupied a considerable amount of land. The Gu family was the #1 aristocratic family in the underworld and was ranked first among the 3 major families in the capital. Even now, after 100 years of prosperity and decline, the Gu family was still a powerful family in the underworld. The Gu clan was in existence that controlled half of the entire underworld. The other clans were wary of them, and they had once enjoyed a period of glory. 15 years ago, there was an internal strife within the Gu family. In order to fight for the position of the head of the family, the direct descendants and the collateral descendants fought until their heads were broken and blood was spilled. Because of this, the Gu family declined for a period of time. Because of this, the Gu family had once fallen apart in 10 years. The bloodline of the Gu family was extremely weak. In the early years, the Gu family's position was unstable and the 2 children of the head of the Gu family, Gu Liancheng, were assassinated. Later on, he had a son. Other than Gu Jinglian, the eldest son, Gu Liancheng also had a concubine son, Gu Xingxia. A concubine son. The so-called concubine son was Gu Liancheng's illegitimate son. Gu Jinglian was the son of Gu Liancheng's first wife and was the rightful successor. However, Gu Jinglian's personality had always been arrogant. He was young and arrogant and was a typical hedonistic second generation. Although Gu Xingxia was younger than Gu Jinglian by 5 years, he was deeply loved by Gu Liancheng. However, in the 100 years of the Gu family's history, there had never been a concubine son who became the head of the family. Even if Gu Liancheng wanted to help him become the head of the family, the elders of the Gu family would probably oppose it. To the century-old underworld families, the distinction between direct descendants and concubines was very particular. The son of a concubine was a son of a concubine. He could not see the light of day. In the car, Gu Xingxia stared coldly at the passing scenery outside the window. His identity had always been a shady one. He had never even stepped into the Gu family with a proper identity. When Gu Liancheng passed away more than a decade ago, Gu Xingxia was only 10 years old. Gu Jinglian called him to his side and gave him a bank card and a plane ticket to a foreign country. This was the first time the 2 brothers had met, but it was also a farewell. At that time, Gu Jinglian had already successfully inherited the position of the head of the Gu family. Naturally, he could not tolerate any provocation. Gu Jinglian stood in the study and spoke to him briefly and straightforwardly. You don't have to work so hard in school. You don't have to work too hard to further your studies abroad. As the bastard son of the Gu family, you don't need to pursue any dreams at all. You only need to know how to squander and enjoy life. After all, I will give you an inexhaustible wealth in this lifetime. Gu Jinglian's evil face was full of mockery. I should have gotten rid of you, but my father left a will before he died. For his sake, sending you abroad is my last mercy. However, you have to remember that the position of the head of the Gu family belongs to me in the end. His words were cold and explicit. If it were not for Gu Liancheng's will before he died, Gu Jinglian would not have tolerated his existence. Going abroad was just another way for him to live. It was not until 10 years ago that he was pardoned and regained the right to set foot on this land. Chapter 347. The car slowly stopped at the private clubhouse. After settling Yun Shishir in the hall, Gu Xingxia hurried to the VIP room. Yun Shishir planned to wait for him in the hall. She waited for a long time. Not long after, Li Lan walked in with a briefcase. As soon as she walked into the hall, she caught a glimpse of a beautiful figure sitting alone in the corner. She couldn't help but take a second look. She was surprised to find that it was Yun Shishir, so she walked over with a smile. Yun Shishir was sitting quietly on the sofa, reading a magazine in her hand. From afar, her slender figure looked so thin, but under the light, there was an indescribable tranquility and beauty. Li Lan was a little surprised to see her here. She sighed inwardly again and walked to the sofa. Li Lan sat down beside her and gently nudged her. Perhaps the movement was too abrupt, but she, who was immersed in her book, was a little startled. Her shoulders couldn't help but tremble, and she came back to her senses. She looked up and saw that it was Li Lan. Her eyes couldn't help but be a little confused. Li Lan smiled and asked, "Why are you here?" Unspoken looked at her in confusion and didn't react. "Why are you here?" "I just finished work and came over for dinner." "What about you?" Unspoken was stunned. She was a little absent-minded for a moment. She turned to look out of the window and realized that it was already dark. She also realized that her empty stomach was a little hungry. She realized that she hadn't eaten for the whole day. Thinking of this, her stomach let out a painful groan. Unspoken felt embarrassed. Li Lan heard it and smiled. "Are you hungry? Let's have dinner together." She nodded slowly. Suddenly, she thought of something. Where's Wuxia? Is he busy? Probably. The CEO's schedule is always unpredictable. I'm not sure. Li Lan paused and said, "Why are you looking for him?" Unspoken suddenly remembered that Wuxia left without saying goodbye yesterday. She was a little angry, so she shook her head calmly. Suddenly, she forced a smile and said, "I'm hungry. I want to eat something." It seemed that she was so hungry that her stomach growled as soon as she finished speaking. She hurriedly covered her stomach, feeling a little embarrassed. Li Lan, who was sharp enough to notice this, laughed. "Looks like you're really starving." Unspoken's cheeks were a little red. She couldn't help but feel aggrieved. Why was Xianxia was gone for so long? She hadn't eaten for a day. Li Lan smiled and asked, "Then what do you want to eat?" "I'll take you to eat." As she said that, she didn't forget to add, "Don't worry, whatever you want to eat, we have it all. And I'll definitely satisfy you." The CEO had repeatedly ordered her to do whatever she wanted, no matter how big or small. Naturally, Wuxia had specially instructed her to do so. Unspoken suddenly remembered that she had been thinking about Chinese food. Usually, she was so busy that Yu was in charge of all 3 meals a day. Now that he wasn't at home, she actually missed his cooking. Hence, she missed it very much. Thinking of this, she moved her lips and said greedily, "I want to eat Chinese food." Li Lan smiled. Of course, she could satisfy such a small request. Chapter 348. Unspoken sent a text message to Xianxia and left with Li Lan. The palace was a high-end place for dining, leisure, and entertainment. It had a KTV, a bar, a gym, and a cafe. Whether it was working or holding a meeting, all kinds of food, drink, and entertainment could be done here. The Chinese restaurant at the palace was very famous. The decoration was elegant, and the signboard was naturally linked to the restaurant's reputation. On average, even if there were only 2 or 3 dishes, it would cost a few hundred to 1,000 yuan. Even so, it was still very popular. Therefore, if one did not make a reservation, it would be very difficult to get a seat. Moreover, it was the peak period for dining, and the flow of customers was fierce. However, for Li Lan, making a reservation was a matter of course. After making an appointment, the store manager specially arranged a small private room with an elegant environment for them. The elegant lighting, glass windows, and bead curtains gave the room a very classical charm. Unspoken did not have a big appetite, but now she was extremely hungry. Looking at the delicious dishes on the menu, she felt even more hungry just by looking at the tempting appearance. The hungrier she was, the more reckless she was. She wanted to eat everything she saw. In the end, she unknowingly ordered a table full of dishes. Looking at the delicious dishes presented one after another, Unspoken pinched her chopsticks and felt a little guilty. Earlier, she glanced at the prices. Just one dish was around a few hundred yuan. With so many dishes, it would be impossible to fill the table without a few thousand yuan. Li Lan was also a little surprised. She looked at the table full of dishes in a daze. Her hand holding the chopsticks was a little stiff. She laughed and asked, "Are you really that hungry?" Unspoken was also a little distressed. Li Lan had eaten some snacks before work, so she did not feel very hungry. Moreover, she did not have a greedy appetite. After a few bites, she felt full and began to put food on Li Lan's plate. Unspoken ate with relish. This Chinese restaurant was indeed worthy of being its #1 signature. The exquisite dishes were indeed delicious, making one greedy for more. Moreover, she was indeed hungry. Now that she was in front of Li Lan, she did not care about her reserved image. She was very focused on eating. Before she knew it, more than half of the food on the table was gone. Li Lan just looked at her like this. Just looking at her like this was pleasing to the eye. This was probably what they meant by a feast for the eyes. No matter what a beautiful person did, it was a kind of pleasure to watch them. Before the soup was served, she raised her head and put down her chopsticks. The tip of her pink tongue gently curled the corners of her lips, as if she had not had enough, but also seemed to be satisfied. There was a kind of cute naivety in her eyes. Li Lan couldn't help but smile. She handed over the handkerchief and asked softly, "Are you full?" Unspoken nodded and took the handkerchief from her. She carefully wiped her mouth and subconsciously touched her slightly bulging belly. It was no wonder that the cost of food here was so high. The food was indeed delicious. If her appetite was big enough, she was confident that she could finish a whole table. She greedily glanced at the silver fish soup that the waiter had served again. She was a little reluctant to part with it, but she really couldn't eat any more. She helplessly sighed, raised her head, and asked softly, "Can I take all of this away?" "Of course, as long as you want." Li Lan said again, "If you like the taste of this restaurant, I'll bring you here next time." Chapter 349. Only then did Unspoken reveal a satisfied smile. "It's getting late. Sure, let's go back." Unspoken didn't show any disgust when Li Lan addressed her intimately. In her heart, she already had a good impression of Li Lan. Hence, she didn't reject Li Lan's affectionate nickname for her. She nodded, stood up, and followed Li Lan out. Just as they walked out of the private room, they bumped into a well-dressed middle-aged man in the corridor. Li Lan's eyes were sharp. She recognized him at a glance. Out of courtesy, she quickly greeted him with a smile. Isn't this Mr. Qian? What a coincidence to meet you here." This middle-aged man was none other than Qian Xiaohua, the investor who was working with Huanyu Entertainment this time. It was also him who had invested heavily in Huanyu's next movie. He was also a famous big boss in Beijing. Hence, out of courtesy, she took the initiative to greet him. Qian Xiaohua also recognized her. He laughed and said, "Haha." Assistant Li? Nice to meet you. I didn't expect to meet you here. Why, aren't you with your Mr. Mu? Li Lan reached out and shook his hand. She was about to answer. However, she saw the man's gaze turn and look straight at Unspoken, who was standing behind her with an expressionless face. Qian Xiaohua's eyes widened slightly. There was surprise in his eyes, but more than that, there was a sigh of admiration. This girl was really beautiful. At first glance, she was already a celestial being. Her existence even brought light to this dimly lit corridor. Perhaps his gaze was too intense, or perhaps it was his gaze that was unique and invasive. Unspoken came back to her senses and followed his gaze. Instantly, she felt a little uncomfortable from the piercing gaze and unconsciously hid behind Li Lan. However, her dodging action, in his eyes, suddenly became a different kind of feeling. She seemed to be shy. It was no wonder that she would be shy. Regardless of whether it was her dressing or her mannerisms, she looked very young and inexperienced. Putting aside her innocent tone, just her tender and beautiful little face was enough to make his heart itch. This girl was somewhat to his liking. It wasn't as if Xianxia had never played with women before. He was the pride of the business world and an investor in the entertainment industry. He had been in the industry for many years and could be said to have traveled among the flowers. With his successful status, he would play with women very fiercely. It wasn't that he hadn't played with innocent girls and schoolgirls before. He had played with plenty of them. But in this era of material desires, how could there be true innocence? They were all pretentious and delicate in order to become famous. At first, he felt that they were a little interesting and charming, but after a long time, most of them were exactly the same. It was inevitable that he would find them boring and annoying. Thus, as he sized her up, his gaze became even more indifferent and deep. He was like a hunter that had locked onto his target, and his eyes were filled with ambition and possessiveness. Li Lan looked at his bright eyes, and the smile on his lips stiffened little by little. At the same time, he felt a little embarrassed. Chapter 350. At that moment, how could she not know what Xianxia was thinking? That look in his eyes, that undisguised desire to plunder on his face, all showed that this man was scheming something in his heart. Li Lan secretly thought that this man must have taken a fancy to the little girl behind her at first glance. According to the past rules, if she were to bring an artist out and encounter such a situation, she would definitely promote it to Xianxia. After all, it was a great honor for an artist in her company to be fancied by this man. To be able to climb to a high branch overnight, like a sparrow flying to a branch to become a phoenix, that was naturally a great thing. Who would reject it? Of course, those girls who stepped into this circle for fame and fortune would be extremely happy. In the vanity market, sending women to those big bosses for entertainment could be considered an unspoken rule. However, now, his target was Unspoken, and this was not allowed. Thus, she subconsciously stood in front of Unspoken, carefully protecting her, and at the same time blocking Xianxia's line of sight. This man then came back to his senses, still absent-mindedly glancing behind her from time to time, with a deep smile on his face. "Mr. Qian, why are you staring at her like that? Don't scare her." Li Lan smiled and said half-jokingly. Before becoming Mu Yaja's assistant, she was born as a manager of the public relations department. In terms of communication, dealing with and negotiating with some clients was naturally easy and handy. In terms of speaking, she was especially good. Just this funny sentence alone was enough to slightly calm the somewhat stiff atmosphere. Xianxia was also considered an experienced businessman. He had been at the wine table for many years, saying one thing in front of others and another behind others. In his heart, he had lived half his life and never taken off the mask on his face. Naturally, his ability to speak and read people's expressions was also top-notch. He could also see that this Li Lan seemed to have the intention of protecting her. Thinking about it, this girl's identity was not ordinary. Could it be that she was the daughter of some family? A socialite from the upper class? However, it did not look like it. It was not because of anything else. It was just that this girl did not have the arrogance and brashness that people in this circle should have. Instead, she had an air of arrogance about her. However, this arrogance was the kind that was ingrained in his bones. He was stubborn and determined. Moreover, the clothes she was wearing did not look like those of an aristocratic family's daughter. They were all simple designs. One had to know that all socialites from aristocratic families dressed extravagantly. Therefore, he rejected this idea. Since he didn't have any background, there was nothing to worry about. He had taken a fancy to this girl. "This girl is so pretty," Xianxia praised from the bottom of his heart. Then, he smiled and looked at Unspoken with an inquisitive look. Which family are you from? TSK, why haven't I seen it before?" "Oh, this girl," Li Lan smiled. Although she was in a difficult position, she still smiled and introduced, "This is an artist signed by Chairman Mu himself." She's a very talented newcomer. But I haven't officially debuted yet. Once I officially debut, I'll have to ask for your help, CEO Qian. Chapter 351. She had deliberately emphasized the words, Chairman Mu, and, personally. The meaning behind her words was already unclear. However, Qian Xiaohua was also very stubborn. Once he set his eyes on a woman, his determination would not be shaken even by thunder. Hey, don't mention it. Huh. Of course, I can't not support Master Mu. He smiled and said a few more polite words. Then, he looked at Yunshursher meaningfully. The latter was obviously not used to his almost bone-piercing gaze, so she avoided Li Lan's gaze even more. She really didn't like this man looking at her as if he wanted to devour her completely. Noticing that she was avoiding his gaze, Li Lan's smile remained unchanged. However, she was slightly nervous. She couldn't help but secretly criticize the man in front of her. It was really difficult to deal with this man in front of her. Although she was Mu Yaja's assistant, Qian Xiaohua's prominent status was there, so she couldn't appear too strong. After all, she was just a small assistant. She had to be very careful with her words in front of a big shot. However, if she was to be more tactful, this old man was really cunning. He deliberately misunderstood her meaning and wanted to avoid her. He was determined to get Yunshursher. However, if she insisted on Mu Yaja's face and rejected him, she was afraid that it would hurt the harmony between them. It didn't matter. The key was that Chairman Mu was now cooperating with him, and this cooperation was not a small matter. They had invested in a blockbuster film. Now that everything had been finalized, they only lacked one thing. If something like this happened halfway, she would have to bear the consequences. Moreover, she really couldn't understand Mu Yaja's thoughts. It was difficult for her to guess at the moment whether this Yunshursher was important to Chairman Mu or not. If she called and asked in front of him, she wouldn't give him a way out. If Chairman Mu didn't respond, he would blame her for not doing things properly. She wouldn't be pleasing either side. It was a dilemma. Now, Li Lan, who had been through a lot, was also trapped in the current situation. It was extremely difficult for her. In all honesty, she wanted to protect her. After all, he had fallen into the hands of this old fox. After being toyed with like this, he was afraid that he would not have a good ending. Regardless of anything else, for this little girl, half of her life would be ruined. She could tell that this girl had a strong sense of self-esteem. It was already difficult for her to stay by Chairman Mu's side. Not to mention this fat old man. Just by looking at her evasive expression, he could roughly guess her reaction. She definitely wouldn't agree no matter what. But how should she deal with this man? Young Master Mu, you have good taste. Speaking of which, this little girl, Qian Xiaohua said with a smile as he approached Yunshursher. She was shocked and quickly retracted her hand. Her body dodged to the side as she stared at him with extreme vigilance. She looked like a frightened kitten as all the hair on her body stood on end. Her brows were filled with a thick hostility. Although she didn't know what this man had in mind for her, she sharply discovered a terrifying ambition in his eyes. This ambition was exactly the same as He Lingxiang's when he looked at her. She didn't want this man to touch her at all. Even if it was just a strand of hair, she didn't want him to touch her. Chairman Qian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 352. Why are you so afraid of me? It's not like I'm going to eat you up. Li Lan was anxious, but she maintained a respectful smile on her face. She smiled and said, Hey, Qian. Mr. Qian, this girl is still so young. Of course she doesn't know anything. I'm afraid that she won't be able to serve you well. Why don't I pick a few girls from the company who know how to do things and send them to you? What do you think? This woman wasn't a simple character. She was too slick in doing things. However, these words made Yunshursher's hair stand on end. She had only heard that Huanyu Entertainment was one of the top entertainment companies in the country. Most of the artists who came from Huanyu were outstanding stars in the film or music industry. However, according to Li Lan's words, Huanyu was actually referring to them as serving people? Was there no place in the entertainment industry that was clean? Qian was a little unhappy. He shook his head and looked at her mockingly. Miss Li. Are you trying to brush me off? It's not that I want to say this, but even if you search the entire Huanyu, you won't be able to find another person like her. Don't talk about those mediocre women in your company. Hearing the impatience and disgust in his tone, Li Lan's face remained calm, but she was a little flustered inside. Could it be that she had to watch Qian Xiaohua openly take Yunshishi away in front of her? If she stopped him forcefully, she was afraid that she would be neglecting him. To be honest, this man was definitely not someone she could afford to offend. With such a tough attitude, even if she brought up the CEO, this man would still be fearless. It was no wonder that he didn't care. Everyone in the entertainment industry knew that Master Mu would never treat the artistes in his company seriously. Women were dispensable. Hence, Qian Xiaohua naturally didn't mind. He was probably thinking that it was just a woman. Would Master Mu be so calculative with him? However, she hadn't been by the CEO's side for so many years for nothing. She could more or less tell that this girl was special in the CEO's heart. It was special. Li Lan sighed inwardly and held Yunshishi's hand tightly. Qian Xiaohua waved at Yunshishi and motioned for her to come over. However, Yunshishi remained silent and expressionless as she leaned against Qian Xiaohua's side. Qian Xiaohua was a little anxious. You lass. How could he be so immature? How did Miss Li teach you? Yunshishi pursed her lips and opened her mouth. She wanted to scold him fiercely, but no sound came out. However, Li Lan squeezed her hand tightly. Li Lan seemed to be telling her not to speak, so she bit her lip again. Li Lan hurriedly said, Mr. Qian, you have to do it for Mr. Mu's sake, right? After all, this girl belongs to him, and no one can touch her. President Qian, you. Chapter 353. Since Mu Yaja was not around, he could do whatever he wanted. Who did not know how to do one thing in front of others and another behind their backs? When Li Lan relayed his words back to Mu Yaja, there was no testimony, so he could just deny it. Who would believe a mere assistant? When the time came, Li Lan would be in deep trouble. She had to admit that this sly old fox had a shrewd plan. Li Lan was stunned. Although her expression did not change, she secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. This Qian Xiaohua was really gutsy. However, when she saw him reaching out to take Yunshishi away by force, she instinctively stood in front of her protectively. Just as her mind went blank from nervousness, an extremely gloomy sneer was heard from the end of the corridor. Tell me, whose face do I have to give into? This casual sentence was laced with a gloomy coldness. It was like a sharp sword sealed in ice, piercing one's heart to the point of numbness. Qian Xiaohua was stunned, and his hands froze. How could he not recognize this voice? However, this voice was so cold that even the expression on his face froze. After a moment of shock, he abruptly turned around and saw a stalwart figure slowly walking toward him. The man had a head of black hair and was dressed in a well-ironed handmade suit. He was arrogant, domineering, and confident. His cold face was arrogant and domineering, and his aura was domineering. He was as handsome as a god. The man strolled over from afar. His steps were steady and calm, just like a lion walking in its own territory. Behind him was a gorgeously dressed woman with heavy makeup on her face and wavy flaxen hair, which was the most popular nowadays. She was very Western-looking. However, Qian Xiaohua still recognized her at a glance. This woman was Huanyu Entertainment's newly signed newcomer, Lu Jingtian. At that moment, his scalp tightened. His eyelids fluttered violently, and his heart pounded like thunder. His old face instantly turned pale from shock. This. What is he doing here? Could it be that he had heard everything that she had just said? D***it. He was done for. Wuxia stopped in his tracks and looked up at Yunshishi, who was hiding behind Li Lan. Seeing that the girl was hiding behind Li Lan, only revealing a corner of her clothes and her small head, the corners of his lips naturally curved into a faint smile. This girl's way of protecting herself really made one feel a little helpless. Did she think that everything would be fine just by hiding like this? He looked at her and said in a deep voice, "Come here." His gaze was fixated on her body. Without a doubt, the bystanders naturally knew who he was calling. His voice was not loud, but it was powerful, and there was a hint of doting in his tone. Even Lu Jingtian, who was beside him, was a little puzzled. It was as if she had never seen this man so easily reveal such a tender side of him. She frowned slightly and her heart was filled with mixed feelings. She followed his line of sight and looked at Yunshishi with hostility in her eyes. She also recognized that this girl was none other than Yunshishi, who had stolen the limelight at the banquet that day. Why is it her again? Why is she here? This woman is really haunting me. Chapter 354. Lu Jingtian's heart ached as she pursed her lips tightly. Her face was filled with undisguised displeasure. She saw the girl's pale, bloodless face behind Li Lan. Her eyes were guarded, as if she had been frightened or aggrieved. She stubbornly pursed her lips and stared at the man with furrowed brows, but she did not take a step forward. This girl was really stubborn. There was no doubt that she was a beauty in the making. Li Lan, on the other hand, was secretly surprised. Even she did not expect the boss to suddenly appear here. In her moment of shock, she saw the boss asking Yunshishi to go over, but the lass did not move. She seemed to be angry, so she reached out and pulled the girl out from behind her, pushing her in the direction of her boss. "Silly girl, why aren't you going over?" Yunshishi lost her footing from the push and fell toward Wuxia, straight into his muscular chest. She awkwardly got up and retreated, wanting to keep a distance from him, but the man's strong arm wrapped around her waist domineeringly. She was forced to snuggle against his chest, and all she could hear was his strong heartbeat. That heartbeat was like a tranquilizer, and it quickly brushed away the uneasiness in her heart. Thus, she did not resist and obediently stayed put. The man lowered his head and looked at her little head buried in his chest. His thin lips curled up. He was obviously very satisfied with her submission, but he was still a little dissatisfied inside. In her mind, it had only been a few days since he had last looked for her. It had only been a few days. He did not expect this lass to be so restless and quickly attract bees and butterflies for him. She had attracted the attention of others. This more or less made him feel unhappy in his heart. Just like his boldness and means in the business world, this man's possessiveness was unreasonably strong when it came to relationships. Although he did not care much for other women and could summon them at his beck and call, this girl had an invisible and unique place in his heart. Although he did not admit it, nor did he realize it, it was undeniable that he found other men touching, peeking at her, and drooling over her to be an eyesore. "I'll settle the score with her later." Lifting his chin slightly, Wuxia swept his gaze across the room and stared at Qian Xiaohua like a ferocious tiger. The latter's heart trembled when he was stared at by that sharp gaze. His scalp immediately went numb, as if he was being stared at by some ferocious beast. Qian Xiaohua turned pale with fright. His domineering aura was quickly defeated. He lowered his head in disappointment and called out weakly, "Chairman Mu." This made it seem like he was extremely guilty. In the past, Qian Xiaohua's status was enough to address Wuxia as "Young Master Mu." However, he was so nervous that he subconsciously changed the way he addressed him and addressed him as "Chairman Mu." Lu Jingtian smiled and casually said, "Oh, you're right. Boss Qian, long time no see. It's rare to see you today, and I heard your loud voice as soon as I arrived." No wonder young Master Mu is unhappy. What you said just now was too arrogant. Chapter 355. Xian Xiaohua's forehead was sweating profusely and his voice trembled slightly. I didn't mean it, I didn't mean it. Mu Yaja's lips curled up slightly, but it was an extremely cold smile. His gaze deepened and the coldness in his eyes became even more gloomy. Chief Qian is very interested in my woman. After saying that, his arm forcefully wrapped around Yun Shishir's shoulders and pulled her towards himself. This action seemed to be a silent declaration. This woman was his. The man who was still holding his head high immediately lowered his head humbly like a tortoise grandson. Beads of sweat dripped down his forehead and he was extremely flustered. This. Xian Xiaohua was in a dilemma. It wasn't appropriate to admit it, but it wasn't right to not admit it either. He was afraid that this man had heard everything that he had said just now. Otherwise, why would he be glaring at him like a tiger eyeing its prey? He had only said those words to show off when Mu Yaja wasn't around. Who would have thought that he would coincidentally bump into him and even hear every single word? He didn't dare to raise his head to look at the man's gloomy expression. Just hearing that cold voice was enough to scare him out of his wits. To be honest, he had only seen Mu Yaja once. Most of the time, it was when they were talking about cooperation at the wine table. In his eyes, Mu Yaja was the noble and arrogant crown prince of an aristocratic family. Although he was young, perhaps it was because he came from an aristocratic background, he had been pampered and cultivated an arrogant personality. It was to the extent that he always looked down on everyone and never put anyone in his eyes. However, when it came to his background, it was extremely mysterious. At least, the people in their circle didn't know anything about it. After being together for so many years, they only knew a little. He only knew that on the surface, this young Master Mu was the famous entertainment tycoon in the capital and he was in charge of 2 entertainment companies with strong qualifications. However, in actual fact, he was an important figure in an aristocratic family. The power behind him was something that they couldn't afford to offend. With just a yawn, the entire financial street would be shaken. This wasn't a groundless rumor. Just based on the fact that the mayor had to condescend to meet him, it could be seen that this kid's background was extraordinary. Because of this, everyone respected this young CEO and bowed down to him. Rather than saying that they were in awe of him, it was more accurate to say that they were afraid of the mysterious power behind him. And this man, in actual fact, he was also a master with ruthless methods. There was a saying in the circle, if you can't become young Master Mu's partner, then you can't become his enemy. Otherwise, the consequences would be dire. Xian Xiaohua naturally didn't want to infuriate him over such a small matter, hence he put on a serious expression. Chairman Mu, you see, it's just a woman. It's fine if you don't want to give her up. This matters. Why should we hurt each other's relationship? Hearing that, Mu Yaja glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. His eyes were languid and his angular face was filled with coldness as he said in a deep voice, "The words you said earlier, I don't like to hear it." His voice was slow and deep, with deep meaning behind it. Anyone who heard it would be able to sense his dissatisfaction. His heart skipped a beat as Qian Xiaohua gave a dry laugh and lowered his head to apologize. Chapter 356. Sigh. Those are all harmless jokes. Oh. Harmless? Mu Yaja coldly raised his eyes. His deep, almond-shaped eyes shone with a sharp glint. This. Qian Xiaohua stammered, not knowing what to say. Mu Yaja sneered and said indifferently in a low voice, "Mr. Qian, how can I feel at ease working with you when you're like this?" Qian Xiaohua was stunned, clearly not expecting him to say that. He immediately looked up with an ugly expression and saw Mu Yaja's handsome face full of indifference. "Master Mu, what do you mean? Could it be that he was going to give up on their collaboration? What kind of international joke is this?" This investment was highly valued by Qian Xiaohua. This blockbuster would bring about considerable profits for both parties. Once he invested in it, he would be able to get rich returns. In the entire capital, only Wuxia had such influence and boldness. But, he actually wanted to kick out their cooperation just because of a woman like this? He had already drawn up the investment for this blockbuster, and he only needed one final push before it could be put into operation. Alas, he was not the only one surprised. Even Lu Jingtian, who was beside him, was shocked. She had never seen him fall out with a business partner over a woman. Even Li Lan, who was used to seeing Wuxia do as he pleased, was a little surprised. Her gaze involuntarily shifted to Unspoken, who was in his arms. It seemed that Unspoken was indeed special to the boss. It seemed that she had done the right thing by defending her earlier. You should know what I mean. He was never one to repeat himself twice. He was disgusted by the way this man stared at his woman. It was extremely annoying. Even without Qian Shaohua in this blockbuster, there would still be many investors lining up to be selected by him. He would not be the only one left. Only then did Qian Shaohua panic. Mr. Mu, can't we talk things over? Why do you have to force me into a dead end for this little lass? Wuxia glanced at him expressionlessly and sneered. He could not be bothered with him anymore. Thus, without another look at him, he proudly strode off with Unspoken in his arms. This man did not intend to give him any face. That resolute back view was simply too domineering. Lu Jingtian stared at Wuxia's back as he left. She wanted to follow him, but if she did, it would make her seem unreserved. She couldn't help but feel a little stuffy in her heart, and her hands couldn't help but clench into fists. Something seemed to flash through her eyes, and her brows slowly furrowed. Qian Shaohua's stiff smile only disappeared when the man was a distance away. Furrowing his brows, he glared at Li Lan and Lu Jingtian in shame and indignation. He gritted his teeth and scolded, "What a load of sh*t. Damn it. With just one sentence, he kicked me out of the partnership. Is that woman more important than this investment?" Li Lan smiled faintly. "Mr. Qian, I told you earlier that this girl's identity is not ordinary, but you didn't believe me. Isn't this what happened?" Qian Shaohua was also a hot-blooded man. He was already in a fit of anger, and now that someone was adding insult to injury, he was even more furious. Chapter 357. Assistant Li? Are you gloating now that my business deal is ruined? She smiled reservedly. How would I dare to laugh at you? Although she said that, she was inwardly overjoyed. That smile was an eyesore to Qian Shaohua. Now, even a small assistant was laughing at him. He angrily cursed in the direction of Wuxia's departure. D****. Why are you so arrogant? Do you think I want to work with you? Who do you think you are? Lu Jingtian returned to her senses when she heard this. Turning her head to look at him coldly, she coolly said, "Mr. Qian, as a person in this industry, it's best to leave a way out for yourself when you speak. You must know clearly what you should and shouldn't say. Do you think you can gossip about Master Mu?" Qian Shaohua glanced at her and was about to rebuke her, but on second thought, this woman's background was not simple. Although she was not a mysterious big shot like Wuxia, her background was not to be trifled with. The reason why she had so many resources waiting in line before her debut was that she had someone backing her. Her father was one of Huanyu's top executives. Just this identity alone was enough for her to do whatever she wanted. The Lu family was born into a rich family, and her mother was also someone important. After thinking about it, he chose to swallow his anger. It's just a woman, is there a need to be so eager? How despicable. Qian Shaohua could not help but curse. She's just a woman. Is there a need for that chap to treat me like this? I've been looking forward to this investment case for a long time. Mr. Qian, I advise you to be more polite with your words. This time, it's just a failed collaboration. If your words fall on Master Mu's ears next time, do you still have a way out in the capital? Qian Xiaohua suffered a setback. His face turned green and red, but he could not bring himself to do it. He snorted angrily, turned around, and walked away. Li Lan and Lu Jingtian looked at each other and then smiled at each other as a greeting. No matter how high her background was, she still treated Li Lan, who was by Mu Yaja's side, with respect. She smiled and asked, "Big sister Li, who is that girl?" Li Lan was about to answer, but after thinking for a while, she paused and said with a smile, "She's just a small artist in the company. It's not worth worrying about." Her answer was very vague and ambiguous. It was no wonder that she was so wary of Han Jingyi. After all, Lu Jingtian was known for her ruthlessness in the industry. She often relied on the power behind her to ostracize newcomers. There were even rumors that she had slapped a newbie in front of everyone because she had badmouthed her behind her back. The newcomer's face was so swollen that he had to wear a mask on stage. After that incident, due to the power behind her, he had no choice but to settle the matter. From then on, he would respectfully address her as Sister Lu whenever he saw her. His predecessor had signed a contract with Haina Corporation, but for some unknown reason, he resolutely transferred to Huanyu Entertainment at the risk of breaching the contract and paying huge compensation. At first, Li Lan didn't quite understand her intentions, but after all, Li Lan's mind was clear, and now she had guessed 70 to 80% of her intentions. This was probably an ulterior motive. She did not want Yun Shishir to inadvertently offend her before she had a firm foothold in the industry. Chapter 358. Lu Jingtian smiled. Even though her answer was perfunctory, she did not pursue the matter. She merely smiled faintly and said, "I was supposed to have a private date with Master Mu tonight, but someone interrupted it. I am very unhappy." She paused for a moment before continuing in a slow and drawn-out tone. "Since this girl is under your care, then. Cicely, I hope that such a thing won't happen again. Don't do it again. You know what to do, don't you?" Li Lan slowly nodded. The smile at the corner of her lips was somewhat forced as her heart turned cold. Her words were considered a deterrent. Late at night, the evening breeze was slightly chilly. Along the way, Yun Shishir's face was pale, while the man's expression was even gloomier. She was practically half carried and half hugged by him the whole way. Her whole body was in his embrace, and it was as if she was about to become part of his flesh and blood. She raised her head, only to see the man's unusually cold expression. He seemed to be angry. She did not know why he was angry, though. She, on the other hand, felt a chill in her heart when she heard the conversation between Li Lan and Qian Xiaohua. Mu Yaja carried Yun Shishir to the back seat and closed the door. The chauffeur started the car, and the streamlined sports car sped out of the clubhouse's entrance. She hurriedly broke free from him the moment she sat down. Her expression was somewhat unnatural as she leaned to the side. She glanced at him, only to see him leaning leisurely against the seat. His straight eyebrows were slightly lowered, and there was a hint of the calm before the storm between his brows. Yun Shishir's face involuntarily tensed up. Her hands unconsciously clenched the leather cushion beneath her as her heart seemed to be weighed down by a heavy stone. Mu Yaja looked at her coldly. His lips suddenly curled into a half-smile. "Come here." Yun Shishir pursed her lips but did not move for a long time. She did not want to be so close to him. Moreover, he was now exuding such a sharp aura. It was as if she would be stabbed by the sharp, cold aura around him if she were to get any closer. The man, however, was dissatisfied with her stubborn behavior. "I never repeat my words twice." His eyes narrowed dangerously and his voice was as cold as ice. His slightly raised eyebrows were like the sharp edge of a sword. She was stunned, but in the end, she still moved a few inches closer to him. She saw the man suddenly wrap his arm around her and easily pull her towards him. His large palm pinched her chin, and the smile in his deep and mesmerizing eyes deepened. He said casually, when I'm not around, you still know how to seduce people? He lowered his head and looked at her face. It was really alluring. Between her frowning eyebrows and narrowed eyes, there was a flirtatious flow. It was really grinding one's mind. Even though it had only been 2 days since he last saw her, he missed her dearly. Especially when he held her in his arms, the desire hidden deep in his heart was immediately triggered. All the hormones in his body were stimulated, and he couldn't wait to take her in the car. However, in this aspect, he was extremely stingy. He was stingy in displaying her beauty in front of others, stingy in showing her bewitchment to anyone other than him. Hence, when he thought of how that old man had looked at her with an unfathomable gaze, and how he had wanted to touch her with his dirty hands. Just thinking about it made him feel extremely dazzled. If he hadn't coincidentally had a meal at the same private club, would this little thing have been snatched away by someone else? Chapter 359. In the past, he also knew what kind of person Xianxia was. His only hobby was to play with women. Sometimes, when he worked with him, he would also send a few female artistes under Huanyu to accompany him. But after a few times, did he silently think that as long as it was a woman from Huanyu, he could casually touch her? Mu Yaja's gaze was extremely dangerous. Yun Shishir was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized what he meant. Her face suddenly turned pale, and she shook her head hard. Saying that she seduced him? I didn't. She denied it heavily. How was she seducing him? What kind of crime was he accusing her of for no reason? Mu Yaja naturally knew that she didn't, but he just loved to tease her like this. He just loved to see her angry gaze. She was just like an angry kitten, ready to bare her fangs and brandish her claws at him if he provoked her slightly. It seemed like this was really a bad hobby. He understood it deep down, but he just loved to tease her like this. He just loved to see how cute she looked when she was mad. He smiled slightly, and his muscular arms simply carried her to sit on his body. Then what did I see just now? If I wasn't here, would you have left with him? I wouldn't. How could she have left with him? You're lying. His large palm clasped the back of her neck, and the man's lips curled into a devilish smile. He leaned close to her ear and whispered, if I hadn't arrived in time just now, would you have left with him? Yun Shishir bit her lip. Just as she was about to speak, she lowered her eyebrows. It was only then that she realized how ambiguous and intimate their current position of hugging each other was. The two bodies were tightly pressed together, and there was no gap between them. In an instant, her face and ears were dyed red. Even her fair and delicate skin was slightly flushed. She couldn't help but move back, but he hugged her back to his chest again. Say it. I wouldn't. Why not? He asked again. Yun Shishir said angrily, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. You seem to dislike me? Why? His voice was very gentle, low, and extremely magnetic. It was full of bewitchment. Which part of me doesn't satisfy you? The man's warm breath instantly heated up her small and cute earlobes. Yun Shishir pursed her lips and turned her face away, but he pinched her face. Mu Yaja's eyes gradually darkened. He lowered his head, and the tip of his tongue gently touched her lips were as sweet as always. Answer. Yun Shishir gritted her teeth, but she really couldn't answer. The palm on the back of her neck suddenly pressed down, and she was caught off guard as she leaned in close to his face. Looking at the handsome face was so close, Yun Shishir, Yun's face. Suddenly lowering his head, the man's slightly cold lips covered her small mouth and pressed against hers. He coldly asked, do you like that, old man? She wanted to shake her head fiercely, but her neck was held tightly by him, so she could not move at all. However, her mouth was blocked by him, and she didn't dare to move for a moment. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes, admiring the helplessness in her eyes. He raised his eyebrows and said, or do you like me? Yun Shishir was stunned, and she instinctively wanted to deny it. How could she like this heartless and cold man in front of her? Chapter 360. Seeing her silent reaction, the man smiled devilishly and said in an unquestionable tone, "Answer me." Yunshursher stubbornly refused to say a word, but she suddenly sensed his hand wantonly reaching into her clothes. Her heart skipped a beat and she subconsciously glanced back from the corner of her eye. However, she saw the chauffeur continue driving as if he didn't see or hear anything. He didn't even glance at the rearview mirror. Every time the man made a move, she would glance at the chauffeur again with lingering fear. Sensing her worried gaze, the chauffeur pressed a button and the partition slowly rose, completely separating the front seat and the back seat. Even so, she still panicked. "Don't." She reached out and grabbed his wrist, saying softly, "Not here." From her words, it was clear that she was already giving in. However, Wuxia wasn't satisfied with this answer. He held her hand back and continued his actions with her fingertips. Yunshursher was embarrassed and annoyed. She struggled, but the strength in his hand was ridiculously overbearing. Thus, she took the initiative to hug his neck with her right hand and lightly pecked his lips. She was taking the initiative to please him again. "Answer me." However, the man was like a devil. He didn't give up and whispered softly in her ear, "Otherwise, I'll do you in the car." Yunshursher was stunned. She saw a playful smile in the man's eyes. There was no doubt that he would really do that. Yunshursher bit her lip and said softly, I like you." There seemed to be some emotions in her eyes that were struggling and intertwining. However, these words were a little against her will. However, the man was in the mood to tease her. He naughtily bit her collarbone and unscrupulously admired her face that was flushed red due to excessive nervousness. He asked softly, "What do you like about me?" Yunshursher looked up in shock and stared into the depths of his deep eyes. "Tell me, what do you like about me?" The man chuckled and pulled her hand downward. "Here." As if her fingertips had been scalded, she quickly retracted her hand and said word by word, "No, don't be like this." She looked at his handsome face, and his eyes were fixed on her face. However, she felt that she was so unbearable and cheap right now. Vaguely, Xianxiahua's aggressive and insulting words rang in her ears again. She suddenly suspected that in this man's heart, she was also a woman with such an existence. One that was as cheap as a commodity. Once it was labeled, it could be casually traded by anyone. She didn't know why, but she was a little concerned about his thoughts. He saw that she had a lot on her mind and her expression was extremely solemn. However, she was also a little sad and a little dazed. Wuxia immediately retracted his smile. He thought of Xianxiahua and wondered what he had said to her that caused this woman to look at him with a gaze that was more or less bone-chilling. He pinched her chin and used a little strength with his fingertips. He was afraid that he would hurt her, so his movements were deliberately gentler. He asked in a deep voice, "What did he say to you?" Those words were simply too embarrassing. She couldn't say it out loud. Seeing that his expression was getting worse, she slowly said, "He just wants me to accompany him for a night." Chapter 361. As soon as she said that, Wuxia's gaze immediately turned gloomy. In the restaurant, he had just walked out of the private room when he heard Li Lan's voice. Amidst his astonishment, he also heard Xianxiahua's voice. However, as they were too far away, he couldn't hear their conversation clearly. He could only vaguely hear that Xianxiahua wanted to take this little woman away. After observing for a while, he stepped forward. However, he didn't know that Xianxiahua was actually using the cheapest currency to measure his woman. Yunshursher said in a low voice, "Am I like that in your heart too? A woman who can be sold for a price?" Seeing that his expression was dark and cold and didn't say anything, she anxiously said, "I'm not a commodity, so don't sell me to others." What responded to her was his ferocious kiss. Without waiting for her to finish her sentence, he fiercely sealed her mouth and kissed every last bit of her broken words. The tip of his tongue recklessly invaded her little mouth and wildly swept across her mouth. His thin lips tightly pressed against her little mouth. He didn't seem to want to give her a chance to breathe. He bit the tip of her tongue and violently plundered her along with her breath. She even thought that she was going to suffocate and faint in his arms in the next moment. Just as her consciousness was about to go blank, he finally let go of her. Xianxia was extremely tired as she laid on his shoulder. Her red lips greedily took in large mouthfuls of air. As she gradually regained her consciousness, she seemed to hear his deep voice. "You're my woman. Who dares to touch you?" His words revealed a bit of arrogance, but also unintentionally revealed a bit of undetectable gentleness. However, she was sensitive enough to feel his gentleness, but this gentleness pierced her heart to the point of pain. She also didn't know why her heart was hurting so badly. It twitched, and she felt a little uncomfortable. The tip of her nose was also sour. This man's domineering protection made her feel an inexplicable sense of security. In her heart, she actually tasted a little bit of sweetness. This man was indeed domineering, but this feeling of being protected in his arms was very good. Asterisk in the VIP room. In front of the billiard table, a devilishly handsome man gracefully crouched beside the table. The cue in his hand was aimed at the billiard ball. A pair of long, narrow, and soul-stirring eyes flickered with a devilish light. Dong, with a crisp sound of impact, the black 8 ball neatly shot into the hole. Whether it was the angle or the strength, it was impeccable. Gu Jinglian stood up casually, his slender hand gently stroking the cue stick, his lips curling into a playful smile. "Director Yang, why are you just sitting there? You're not moving at all. You should play to your heart's content, shouldn't you?" As he spoke, he smiled and turned around. "Look, I won again." "You have no chance again, hee." Everyone looked at his strange and unpredictable smile, disdain and contempt on his cold and elegant face, and they all swallowed with difficulty. Gu Jinglian was smiling, but everyone present felt a chill run down their spines. They were frightened by this man's temperamental mood swings and his mood swings. At the side, in a corner, Yang Shoucheng sat on the sofa with a stiff expression. His whole body sank into the sofa, his face pale and his shoulders trembling uncontrollably. Chapter 362. At his feet, there was a corpse lying quietly. Its eyes were terrifyingly wide open. 3 minutes ago, the corpse was still alive. It was one of Yang Shoucheng's bodyguards. Now, there was a bleeding hole between his eyebrows. He had offended young Master Gu with one sentence and ended up like this. It was too horrible to look at. Fresh blood flowed onto the floor, filling the room with the thick smell of blood. The temperature of his skin was gradually cooling. The terrifying atmosphere of death enveloped the large room. Qin Zhou looked at Yang Shoucheng's ashen face with sympathy and walked to the table to arrange the balls. Ji Lin was playing with a few billiard balls on the side, but he looked as if he was used to this scene. Gu Jinglian slowly sat down on the sofa and lit a cigarette. His slender hand brushed the slightly messy hair on his forehead as he said slowly, "Mr. Yang, why aren't you saying anything? Could it be that Jinglian didn't treat you well enough and you didn't have enough fun?" His body sank into the sofa. Beside him, 2 sexy girls dressed in sexy and revealing clothes immediately came up to him. Their graceful and exquisite bodies slowly straddled his body, carefully holding his handsome face, and planted a kiss on his lips. Gu Jinglian smiled flirtatiously. His large palm suddenly reached under the woman's skirt and moved up, teasing her body. Yang Shoucheng was inexplicably shocked. "No. Young Master Gu, you're being too serious. How's the injury on your hand recovering, Mr. Yang?" Gu Jinglian didn't look at him. He was focused on playing with the woman who kept touching him coquettishly. His tone was chilling. "It's fine now. If Xianxia offended you in any way, tell me." I'll apologize to you on his behalf. Yang Shoucheng's face stiffened. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Apologize? Asking the head of the Gu family, the most powerful family in the underworld, to apologize to him wasn't just an apology. It was asking for his life. Yang Shoucheng was filled with regret at this moment. He didn't expect Gu Xingza's brother to be Gu Jinglian of the underworld Gu family. This was incredible. He had offended someone he shouldn't have offended. Previously, he did not know who Gu Xingza was. He only knew that this young man was very arrogant and dared to challenge him. Who was Yang Shoucheng? The godfather of Hong Kong cinema, a legend of his generation. He was the man who dominated the Hong Kong film industry for 20 years. He had been in the entertainment industry for so many years. With his strong background and methods, no one had dared to give him any face. Gu Xingza was the first and only one. After the cocktail party, Qin Zhou had also brought a few of the people in charge of Huanyu to personally apologize. However, Yang Shoucheng was proud and arrogant. How could he be appeased so easily? The reason he asked Qin Zhou for Gu Xingza was because he wanted to get Gu Xingza to come over and teach him a lesson. He wanted him to know that the entertainment industry was huge and that he, Yang Shoucheng, was a man of his word. Don't think that you can look down on others just because you've been in the industry for 10 years and have been hailed as a heavenly king idol. Even the higher-ups of Huanyu had to give him face. Gu Xingza did not know the immensity of heaven and earth and dared to go against him. However, he didn't expect that Gu Xingza wasn't a simple character. The Gu family of the underworld was the only wealthy family in Beijing that had been passed down for hundreds of years. Chapter 363. It could be said that the Gu family was perhaps the only family that could rival the Mu family. How big was the Gu family's territory? No one knew. Although they had used some means to whitewash their family's reputation, they were still the underworld in their bones. Whether it was their methods or their style, they were all ruthless. Especially Gu Jinglian. He was an extremely dangerous and terrifying person. When Gu Jinglian became the head of the Gu family, he was only 23 years old. However, as soon as he gained power, he immediately revealed his ambitious and ruthless side. On the second day of his ascension, he eliminated all the hall masters and retainers who were disloyal to him. His methods were so ruthless that it made people tremble in fear. Compared to Gu Jinglian's methods, Yang Shoucheng's level was simply not enough. As the crown prince of the underworld, Gu Jinglian's style was mysterious and unpredictable due to his identity. Very few people had seen his true face. It was rumored that those who had seen his true face no longer existed in this world. Yang Shoucheng's legs could not help but tremble. How could he not be afraid? Although he had been running amok in Hong Kong for so many years, he had always maintained a sense of respect for the Gu family, a powerful underworld family. Gu Jinglian was famous for being temperamental and unpredictable. He was a truly terrifying person. Even if he was smiling, his coldness seeped right into one's bones. Because you would never know if you would die in his hands in the next moment. The door was suddenly pushed open. Gu Xingza pushed the door open and walked in. Gu Jinglian looked up. Seeing him, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Xingza, you're here? Brother. Second Master Gu, Yang Shoucheng's face suddenly turned pale. He rushed over and knelt down heavily in front of Gu Xingza. Under extreme fear, his thick lips cracked and trembled. Large beads of cold sweat seeped out of his forehead and rolled down. Gu Xingza kicked his hand away unhappily. Mr. Yang, what are you doing? Xingza, do you want to explain to Master Gu that what happened between us was purely a misunderstanding, just a misunderstanding? Gu Jinglian said nonchalantly. Xingza, did you offend Mr. Yang in some way? Hurry up and apologize to him. His voice was very gentle, but when it entered her ears, it made her shudder. Gu Xingza said calmly, Brother, I didn't. Qin Zhou said helplessly, Young Master Gu, it's actually not a big deal. It's just a small misunderstanding. I've already explained it to Mr. Yang. But he didn't seem willing to give me face and insisted that I hand Xianxia over to him. That's what happened. Mr. Yang, you're in the wrong here. Gu Jinglian slowly stood up and paced around Yang Shoucheng. Shaking his head, he sighed, my younger brother grew up overseas, so he doesn't know much about the rules of the underworld in Beijing. After a pause, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Then, he said calmly, according to the rules, as his brother, I'm also half a guardian. If he has offended you in any way, you can look for me directly. I'll apologize to you on his behalf. But do you think you can take away a member of the Gu family just because you want to? If you take my woman away, how will I, Gu Jinglian, be able to show my face? What will happen to the Gu family's prestige? Chapter 364. Young Master Gu, I didn't know who he was at first. Yang Shoucheng wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeve and said with an ugly expression. You didn't know? That can't be. Gu Jinglian leaned elegantly in front of the billiard table. He played with a poker in his hand and said faintly, I think you clearly don't care about me, Gu Jinglian. Yang Shoucheng's expression changed. He immediately turned pale with fright and said, Young Master Gu, you've wronged me. I didn't know that Gu Xianxia was the second young master of the Gu family. Gu Jinglian's lips curled into a smile, but his voice was extremely cold. He said, Yang Shoucheng, I don't care about how glorious you were in Hong Kong in the past. But since you have one foot in the capital, you should know whose territory the capital is. I know. I always knew, you knew. You knew, but you still dared to mark my territory. Gu Jinglian's gaze swept over. His shiny leather shoes heavily stepped on Yang Shoucheng's hand. He said fiercely, do you know whose name is engraved on the capital's territory? Who do you think you are? You're in the Gu family's territory and you don't know how to follow the rules. Do you think I will tolerate you? Yang Shoucheng was in so much pain that his face turned pale. In a moment of confusion, he suddenly realized what Gu Jinglian was referring to. His face turned pale for a moment. I wouldn't dare. Young Master Gu, you've misunderstood. I definitely didn't mean that. Please don't lower yourself to my level. Yang Shoucheng nervously grabbed Gu Jinglian's trousers and begged for mercy. But he didn't know that his so-called goodwill had violated Gu Jinglian's taboo. Tsk Gu Jinglian's thin lips curled slightly and his eyebrows furrowed in disgust. Look, you've dirted my trousers. What should I do? After saying that, he suddenly stretched out his leg and kicked him away. Yang Shoucheng rolled a few times in a sorry state before he slumped against the corner of the table. His nose was bruised and his face was swollen. He was in so much pain that he sucked in a breath of cold air. His eyes couldn't even move. He saw his well-trained subordinates walking over expressionlessly. An incomparably mournful scream was heard, blood flowed like a river in the private room. Yang Shoucheng cradled his broken arm, his entire face red from the extreme pain. He kept wailing and rolling on the ground in a sorry state. Gu Jinglian glanced at him coldly and turned to leave the room. Qin Zhou and Ji Lin followed suit. Before Gu Xianxia left, he walked up to him and grabbed his neck, warning him coldly, I'm warning you, don't even think about touching her. The she he was referring to was none other than Yun Shishir. However, Yang Shoucheng was in a daze from the pain and could only nod his head randomly. Gu Xianxia felt relieved and left. When he walked out of the room, he took out his phone and saw Yun Shishir's message. It was getting late and she should be going back. The car drove all the way back to the villa. Yun Shishir looked out of the car window and her gaze suddenly froze. At the main entrance of the villa, there was a landscape stone carved from a huge rock of the origin mountain. The words, Yun Shan Shir Yi, were carved on it. Yun Shan Shir Yi was the name of the villa. Chapter 365. Yun Shan Shir Yi. What do you think of this name? Yun. There was no need to explain the meaning behind it. She followed the man out of the car, but he pulled her into his embrace with his arm. Her head bumped into his chest. She furrowed her brows in pain, but when she looked up, she saw him smiling teasingly with a hint of playfulness in his eyes. Didn't you want to send me home? Yun fumed. Why are we here? I missed you. Accompany me tonight. The man felt a little smug. If Yun Tianyu knew that the boring summer camp at the kindergarten was specially arranged by a certain man, he would surely gnash his teeth in anger. Back at the villa, she began to feel restless and sat motionless on the sofa. She watched the man, who had taken a shower, leisurely walk back and forth in front of her. He was wearing a loose bathrobe and was leisurely wiping his wet hair. Unintentionally, her eyes would involuntarily wander to his slightly exposed chest. She would then turn away with a burning face. Wuxia walked to the wine cabinet and poured himself a glass of vodka. From the corner of his eye, he glanced coldly at the woman, who was still sitting motionlessly on the sofa. She seemed to be afraid of something, or perhaps she was hiding from something. He had been traveling the business world since he was 18 years old. He had to admit that some women were really scheming. Even those shrewd businessmen in the business world had to admit that they were inferior to them. This little woman in front of him, however, was simple and transparent. Her thoughts could be easily seen from her face. How could this little woman hide her thoughts from him? He leisurely sipped his glass of vodka, only to see her still sitting on the same spot like a cushion of needles. Her head was lowered in a daze, and he did not know what was on her mind. Hence, he asked, "Aren't you going to shower?" "Yes, I'll shower later. I'll wait for you in the room." With that, he walked into the bedroom and didn't look at her again. Yun was stunned. She watched the man enter the bedroom but did not move for a long time. After waiting for a while, she thought, he should be asleep, right? Therefore, she looked around and guessed that he must be tired and asleep. Only then did she start to walk around the room. The bedroom was very big. It was connected to the living room, cloakroom, bathroom, study, and even a bar counter. Everything was available. She sat on the sofa for a while before she got up and walked into the bathroom. She took a shower with a messy heart. Before leaving the bathroom, he subconsciously tightened the knot on his bathrobe. In the end, he accidentally tied a dead knot. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. She walked into the bedroom. The small wall lamp was still lit. It was left for her. However, he seemed to have fallen asleep. He was lying on his side, and his tall body occupied 2/3 of the space. She secretly rejoiced and carefully climbed onto the bed. Her movements were light as she was afraid that she would make the slightest noise. However, before she could lie down properly, she felt the movement of his body beside her. This movement scared her so much that her heart stopped beating. While she was still in a daze, the man reached out and pulled her over. His large palm reached for the knot on her bathrobe. Wuxia tugged at the knot on her bathrobe. His lips curled into a devilish smile as he said playfully, "This knot is very tight." Chapter 366. Yun face instantly flushed red. The two were so close to each other that she could still feel the man's hot breath by her ear. Her body stiffened all of a sudden. "Do you think that I can't do anything to you just because you tied a dead knot?" The man leaned close to her ear, and his tone was a little provocative. She was so scared that she shut her eyes tightly, but before she could get what she wanted, with a pop, her vision darkened, and the lights went out. Behind her, Wuxia's deep voice came. "Go to sleep." She heard the man's mocking voice with a smile. "I'll let you off tonight." Even if they slept together and didn't do anything, smelling the orchid fragrance in her hair, it was as if the haze in his heart had been swept away. Even though the beauty was lying in his arms, and she was such a hot little woman, with her curvaceous body pressed tightly against his chest, and her delicate skin intentionally or unintentionally rubbing against his body, he impulsively thought, why should he take pity on her and suppress himself so much? Why not strip her clothes off and barge into her to satisfy his lust? However, when he felt her tense body again, he didn't move in the end. The evil thoughts in his body that he had deliberately suppressed for a long time were already restless, clamoring non-stop. However, he had no choice but to suppress this fire and not think about it. This was the first time. In order to accommodate a woman, he had to suppress the endless desire in his body. Just because he didn't want to scare her. Forget it. He would let her off today. But even so, he still had to do something to suppress that nameless fire. Hence, Wuxia lowered his head, pressed her down and kissed her heavily. The tip of his tongue greedily hooked her lips, but he stopped there and hugged her tightly in his arms. Only then did he leave it at that. In the morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone through the gap between the heavy curtains, she woke up. To be precise, she didn't sleep well the entire night. The man behind her was indeed asleep, but his arm was still tightly locked in his embrace, confining her domineeringly. Such a possessive action didn't allow her to struggle at all. The distance between them was so close, and his steady breath lingered around the tip of her nose. She was a little absent-minded. Xianxia carefully broke free from his restraints and slowly got off the bed. She walked into the living room and opened the curtains. Outside the window, the sun was already shining brightly. When she passed by the study, she inadvertently caught a glimpse of a huge picture frame hanging on the wall. With some curiosity, she carefully walked in. Her footsteps were light, and she actually felt a little guilty. Hanging on the wall was a family portrait. It was so exquisite that it was framed. In the photo, Mu Sheng was seated at the head of the table. Beside him were Mu Wanru, Jiang Yishan, Mu Liancheng, and the young Mu Yaxia. The photo seemed to have been taken a long time ago, but because it had been carefully stored, it still looked as good as new. Xianxia naturally couldn't recognize the others, but Mu Yaxia could. When he was young, Mu Yaxia didn't have much of a sharp and oppressive aura, but he was still unique among children his age. His handsome features, handsome brows, and cold eyes did not change much from now. He was 90% similar to Yu. Bloodlines were really something incredible. Chapter 367. Just as Xianxia was feeling emotional, her peripheral vision fell on a girl beside Mu Sheng. Her gaze changed slightly, and for a moment, her emotions were in turmoil. That girl's face was very familiar, as if she had seen her somewhere before. Her eyebrows, eyes, and even that pair of eyes seemed to be familiar. She felt a strong sense of déjà vu, familiar. Extremely familiar. However, her childhood memories were too hazy, and she could not remember much of them. According to psychology, if one's memories were too dark, one would selectively forget them and be unwilling to recall them. Too many memories of his childhood were dark and gloomy. Subconsciously, Xianxia chose to seal them away and was unwilling to look back on them. Therefore, those memories were too distant, and she had already sealed them away. For a moment, she could not remember where she had seen this girl before. Feeling a little vexed, Xianxia's gaze fell on the picture frame on the study table, and her eyes could not help but become as gentle as water. She picked up the small picture frame and saw Shao Yichen standing in a dashing military uniform. His handsome face was in high spirits, and he was in high spirits. In contrast to the sickly Yun Tianyu, Shao Yichen was full of vitality. His every movement seemed to have inherited his father's imposing and high-spirited manner. However, he also inherited Mu Yaja's cold and mature temperament, so it was inevitable that he would be difficult to get close to. This photo was taken a year ago when he was training in the special training camp. The uniform was tailor-made, and it was very fitting. Shao Yichen's physique was very strong. His shoulders were broad, and his waist was narrow. He had the perfect golden ratio. Despite his young age, he looked very dashing in the military uniform. Yun picked up the picture frame and looked at Xiao Yichen's face, which seemed to be carved from the same mold as Yu's. Her fingertips slowly caressed the pair of eyebrows in the picture, and her heart ached a little. The two little fellows were so alike. Yun pursed her lips. She used to miss this child all the time. Blood was connected to the heart, and blood was thicker than water. It was not something that could be cut off by distance. The day after tomorrow was the 1st of June. Children's Day was also the birthday of these two little guys. It was as if he was personally giving the little fellow a gift. Yun thought longingly in her heart. Immersed in her thoughts, she did not notice the footsteps behind her. It was not until a pair of arms wrapped around her body that she suddenly came back to her senses. Turning her head, she saw Mu Yaja's Jun Yen, who had just woken up. The man's chin gently rested on her shoulder. As he had just woken up not long ago, his body was not as fierce as before, and his eyes were not as sharp. Instead, there was a kind of exhaustion and decadence. His messy hair slightly covered his eyelids, but it unexpectedly made him look unreasonably sexy. This man was so stylish even when he was dispirited. No wonder so many women flocked to him. What are you looking at? Oh, photos. Mu Yaja took the photo from her hand and glanced at it. This was taken last year. Huh. The little fellow is much taller than last year. How tall is he now? Yun asked eagerly. She was eager to fill in more information about Xiao Yichen, 140 centimeters. That tall? Yun was a little surprised. He's much taller than Yu. Chapter 368. Mu Yaja lowered his head to look at her. With a smile, he asked, How tall is Yu? About 120 centimeters. Like this. Yun made a rough comparison. His height was around her waist. This was the result of a physical examination at the kindergarten a month ago. Yun Tianyo's height was considered taller than other children his age. The average height of a boy his age was around 110 centimeters. However, in a way, Yu's growth could not keep up with his age. Mu Yaja was nearly 1.9 meters tall, while she was 1.69 meters tall. However, for some reason, Yun Tianyo's growth seemed to be slower than other children of the same age. Compared to Xiao Yichen, however, the difference in height was obvious. Does he take calcium tablets? Yes, he takes them every day, but his growth can't keep up. The mention of Yu's health was undoubtedly a sore point for her. I asked the doctor about it. It might have something to do with him being born prematurely. Most premature babies have stunted growth. When he was born, his body was very weak. Initially, the doctor said that the child's condition was terrible. His heart was congenitally deficient, and his spleen and stomach were not functioning well. He even said that he would not live past the age of 3. At that time, I was on tenterhooks every day, afraid that I couldn't save him. Mu Yaja's handsome brows furrowed slightly. He did not know that Yun Tianyo's health was so bad. He only knew that the child was almost lost. He thought that this woman had hidden the child for her own selfish reasons and used a groundless excuse to cover up her crime. He even thought that the child would be as healthy as Xiao Yichen. Later, when they met at the hospital and learned from the doctor that his health was not good, he was surprised and stunned, but more than that, he felt sorry for him. Until now, when he learned from Yun that the child had suffered from so many illnesses since birth, his heart ached so much that it almost suffocated him. Although Yun spoke of it casually, no one knew how much effort she had put in to protect Yun Tianyu during the most torturous days back then. She had exhausted herself mentally and physically in exchange for Yun Tianyu's rebirth time and time again. Yun said helplessly, maybe it's because he developed late. Mu Yaja looked at her side profile solemnly and did not speak. Yun suddenly turned around and asked, Oh, right. The day after tomorrow is the two children's birthdays. Have you prepared any gifts? Gifts? Mu Yaja raised his handsome brows and shook his head. No. No? Yun Shishir was taken aback. Aren't you going to give a child a present on his birthday? Mu Yaja said, I have gifts. Basically, whatever he likes, and I'll get someone to buy it. Needless to say, his love for Xiao Yichen was unparalleled. However, as a father, his way of expressing his love was ultimately not that meticulous. It was a little crude. Yun Shishir could not help rebuking him. You should prepare a gift in advance. That way, the child will have a surprise for his birthday. Surprise? Children like surprises? Mu Yaja fell silent. He did not know how to create a surprise. If the child liked it, he would prepare it and buy it. Coaxing a child was probably similar to coaxing a woman. Chapter 369. Yun Shishir seemed to have seen through his thoughts. She said helplessly, a child's favorite moment on their birthday is probably opening their presents. Nothing can replace that kind of anticipation. I don't know what to prepare. Are you free this afternoon? Yes. Yun Shishir hesitated for a moment before she suggested, Are you willing to accompany me to the mall? Coincidentally, I also want to prepare a birthday present for you. Mu Yaja nodded without hesitation. Yun Shishir couldn't help but feel a little excited. She clearly knew that this man was usually very busy. After all, he was in charge of a huge financial group. He must have a lot of work to do. However, when she heard that he was willing to accompany her to the mall, she was a little surprised and pleasantly surprised. She didn't know why, but her mood suddenly improved. Even the weather outside the window became sunny. It was a good day. However, when Yun Shishir finished washing up and walked out of the bathroom, she saw that the man had changed into casual clothes and was sitting on the sofa. She walked over and was about to speak when she saw that there was something wrong with his expression. His whole body sank into the sofa, his head was lowered, and his breathing was a little heavy. She was stunned. He looked like he was in pain. His hands were gripping the armrest of the sofa tightly, and his fingers were hideous. Yun Shishir leaned over slightly and saw that his forehead was covered in large beads of cold sweat. His handsome face was pale, and it looked a little scary. You. What's wrong with you? My stomach hurts, Mu Yaja said in a low voice. His voice sounded a little heavy. Yun Shishir suddenly recalled that Mu Yaja's expression was a little strange from the beginning. When he hugged her from behind, she could clearly feel his stiff movements and heavy body. At first, she didn't think too much about it. What she didn't know was that Mu Yaja had a very serious stomach problem. This stomach problem originated from more than 10 years ago. When he was young, Jianghu passed away from illness. It was a huge blow to him, and his willpower collapsed very quickly. He locked himself in his room, refusing to eat or drink. That period of time was gloomy and heavy, almost without any light. His mother was a very important part of his life, and the separation of life and death was almost unbearable for him. Therefore, after a month of continuous physical torture, his body quickly became thin and he suffered from physiological anorexia. Although his anorexia was cured later, it left behind a very serious illness. If he didn't eat 3 meals a day on time, it would flare up. When the stomach disease acted up, it would be extremely painful. No matter how strong one's willpower was, it would still be difficult for them to endure it. Thus, they would always have stomach medicine at home. Mu Yaja lifted his heavy eyelids and pointed at the cabinet. Medicine. Only then did Yun Shishir realize that he was suffering from gastric problems. Yu also had mild gastric problems. When he was suffering from gastric problems, he was also in pain. It was heartbreaking. Following the direction he pointed, Yun Shishir rummaged through the cabinets and finally found a medicine box. She opened it. Other than the simple medicine for wounds, most of it was gastric tranquilizers. She referred to the dosage of the medicine and took 2 tablets. She held a glass of water and handed it to him. Wuxia reached out to take it, but there was a sharp pain in his stomach. He didn't hold the glass firmly. With a bang, the glass fell to the ground. Water splashed everywhere, and the splashing glass cut Yunshi's arm. Chapter 370. Seeing him fall over, Yunshi did not notice the bleeding wound at all. She hurriedly squatted by the sofa and held his face. Wuxia. Get up, sit up. I'll feed you the medicine. There was no response. It was as if he was in so much pain that his consciousness was blurry. Yunshi hugged his shoulders again and tried to help him sit up, but his body was too heavy and she could not exert any strength. Yunshi looked at the pill in her hand in annoyance, then lowered her head to look at the man's handsome face that was twisted in pain. She did not care so much and rushed in to pour a glass of pure water. She walked to the sofa and stuffed a pillow under his head for him to rest on. She held the back of his neck and put the medicine in the water until it dissolved completely. She cupped his face and parted his thin lips. She drank a mouthful of water and carefully passed the water into his mouth. Wuxia's throat moved and he swallowed the water. Yunshi then passed the medicine into his mouth in one go. After a while, the man regained some consciousness. He opened his eyes slightly and vaguely saw Yunshi's nervous face. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Can you sit up? Yunshi saw that his face was pale and she was worried for a moment. Usually, in her impression, this man was always high and mighty, like a king who could summon the wind and rain. He was as powerful as a god. However, she did not expect him to be so weak now that he had gastric problems. He was not angry at all. When she thought of this, she could not help but laugh at her ignorance. No matter how powerful this man was, he was still a person like her. He was not a god. People would eventually fall sick. Illness came like a landslide. No matter how strong a person's body was, there would be times when they fell sick. Was it because he did not eat breakfast when he woke up? She did not know why, but she was blaming herself. Thus, she hurriedly said, "Lie down for a while. I'll make breakfast for you." She had just gotten up when the man suddenly grabbed her arm. With a tug, Yunshi lost her balance and fell into his arms. "What are you doing?" She was a little angry, a little anxious, and a little worried. She was afraid that she would fall so heavily and crush him. Wuxia held her neck with one hand and his other hand slowly caressed her lips. There was a trace of dark sharpness in his eyes. "Where are you going?" "I'm making breakfast for you. You have gastric problems. It must be because you don't eat 3 meals regularly." Yunshi replied. She wanted to get up again, but the man held her in his arms. But this time, his arm was firmly locked onto her waist, not giving her any chance to escape. "You. What are you doing?" she asked in annoyance. She frowned and was slightly annoyed. Her tone was coquettish, and her eyes revealed helplessness and embarrassment. Wuxia lowered his head and looked at her. He could see the angry expression on her face. Seeing him staring at her with a deep gaze, Yunshi was a little stunned. She pursed her red lips and bit her lip gently, looking a little uneasy. However, such a small action, in his eyes, had an inexplicable charm and shyness. It was even seductive. The way she bit her lip was so cute that his body, which was originally tense because of his illness, started to heat up. Chapter 371. Thus, he said, "I'm not eating breakfast. I want to eat you." When Yunshi heard this, her face stiffened and she said dejectedly, "Hey, I really lost to you. Your stomach is acting up, why are you still so restless?" "Not only is my stomach acting up, my lovesickness is also acting up, don't you know?" How long had it been since he had touched this woman? He couldn't remember the number of times. He only knew that his body was constantly clamoring, wanting to possess her, penetrate her, and even wanted to integrate her into his bones and blood. How long had it been since he had tasted that feeling? He missed it so much. He missed it so much that even though his stomach was acting up, the desire in his body was constantly stirring. He was like a youthful and ignorant youth who had tasted the forbidden fruit for the first time, wanting more. Yunshishi was a little annoyed as she rebuked, "Mu Yaja, are you a scoundrel? Your body is already like this, and you still." Halfway through her words, she couldn't continue no matter what and only felt ashamed. Her tender and white face was stained with a blush of shyness. She lowered her eyes and wished she could dig a hole in the ground right now to bury her burning face. She might as well just bury it. Muyaja saw the shyness on her face and felt that it was a little interesting, but also a little funny. He boasted that he wasn't a man whose lower body was swayed by his emotions. He was different from those second-generation hedonistic sons who liked to play with women. When it came to women, he had always had self-control, and even had misophobia. But this woman was simply a charming and fragrant evil concubine. What she had was the ability to make men obsessed with her. Even if it was in ancient times, no matter how wise the king was, he would probably be like King Yu of Zhou for Baosi. In order to win a beauty's smile, he would use the beacon fire to play with the feudal lords. He wrapped his arms around her neck and brought her face closer. A pair of handsome eyes slowly swept over her face for a long time, allowing his face to be immersed in her hair, unscrupulously smelling the freshness and charm of her hair. At the same time, because of this suppression, his body was tense to the point that it was almost painful. The man slowly opened his sharp eyes and met that jade-like face again. Suddenly, he asked coldly, "Do you think that having sex with me is a shameful thing?" Her face was slightly hot, but she didn't make a sound, as if she didn't agree or disagree. The man smiled and said faintly, "Woman, do you know, scientists say that an adult's normal routine should be 3 to 4 times a week." Yunshishi saw him suddenly speaking and she was a little unable to react. Then, the man asked further, "Think about it. How long has it been since I touched you? Don't tell me, normal needs." Yunshishi was inexplicably at a loss for words. He said it so righteously and she couldn't refute him, but she felt that there was something wrong with his logic. Muyaja played with a strand of her hair, twirling it around his finger and playing with it. His breath was like orchids. "I only have you as my woman. I have my needs. If you don't let me touch you, who else should I touch? Moreover, you're a woman and I'm a man. Is this kind of love between a man and a woman shameful in your eyes?" Yunshishi thought for a moment and suddenly said with a red face, "You obviously have a fiancé." The man's handsome face raised a trace of inexplicable meaning. His eyes were like torches as his long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly, with a hint of deep meaning. So, this was what she cared about? Chapter 372. Jealous that he had a woman in name but not in reality by his side? Yunshishi felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by him and wanted to brush it off. "Let's not talk about it anymore. Does your stomach still hurt? Are you jealous?" "No. You clearly are. If you're jealous, then let me tell you, you don't have to think too much." Muyaja hugged her waist and pulled her towards him. He turned his body slightly and pressed her under his body. He pinched her chin and covered her lips with his. He sealed her lips with a gentle kiss. After a simple and charming kiss, he looked at her and smiled. "You only need to know that my body wants you. I don't have any feelings for other women." As he spoke, he grabbed her hand that she didn't know how to move and guided it downwards until her fingertips touched that mysterious territory. Through the material of his clothes, she could vaguely feel that arrogant posture. Thus, her face became even hotter, as if blood was about to drip out. "What about you? Don't you want me?" The man was so gentle beside her ear that his warm breath curled around her earlobe, burning her ears and neck. This woman's body seemed to be extremely sensitive. Even a gentle touch would make her blush, not to mention his advances. Her entire body was burning. You. Unspoken said angrily. That's enough. Wuxia didn't give her a chance to refute and blocked her mouth with a sentence. I only want you. I don't have any feelings for other women. Unspoken blushed at his words again. Wuxia played with her lips gently, his fingertips caressing those cherry lips that made one drool, but he said word by word, as for the status, I'll give it to you. But now is not the time. Wuxia. You. Is this considered a courtship? Unspoken asked all of a sudden. The man's face froze. But your stomach is acting up. If you don't know how to control yourself, you'll suffer when the time comes. Unspoken lectured him seriously. Her words were a prophecy or a curse. Just as she finished speaking, his stomach, which was already feeling better, experienced another day of cramping pain. Was this woman a curse master? This stomach pain, speak of the devil. Did she have to spoil the fun like this? A certain man felt very sullen. In order to eat this woman, since she didn't like his forceful methods, he had to persuade her with reason and emotions. Just as he was about to eat her, the stomach pain came again. Damn it, if your stomach hurts, then have a good rest. Unspoken threw him on the sofa. As she pushed open the door to leave, she said, be good and wait for me. I'll cook noodles for you. Wuxia could only stare at her back view as she left. Seeing the fragrant meat in his mouth fly away, he didn't have any other thoughts. Unspoken closed the door and held her heart with both hands. Her heart was thumping. Status, I'll give it to you. The man's firm words kept echoing in her ears. She didn't dare to let her imagination run wild. She took a deep breath and quickly went to cook noodles for the man. Chapter 373. The noodles were specially cooked so that they would break in the mouth and be easily digested. When she presented the noodles to the man, Wuxia's unsatisfied and cold face, coupled with the hot noodles, seemed to be a sharp contrast. Unsatisfied, how unsatisfied was he? I don't want to eat noodles, I want to eat. Shut up and eat the noodles. Unspoken said with a red face. Is it wrong for me to want to eat meat? Wuxia took the bowl and said that deliberately. His expression looked innocent, but there was a hint of teasing in his eyes. He was skirting the boundaries, which was considered flirting. Although he couldn't touch her physically, he could still flirt verbally. Thus, Wuxia's mood improved a little as he enjoyed her embarrassed face. Then, he finished the entire bowl of noodles, not leaving a single bit behind. When he finished the whole bowl of noodles, the stomachache seemed to have dissipated by a lot. The car drove slowly into the shopping center. Wuxia dropped Unspoken at the entrance and parked the car. Unspoken looked up and sized up the magnificent entrance of the shopping center. Such a huge building stood in the most expensive area in the city center. It was like a piece of treasure land where every inch was worth gold and silver. The entrance was luxurious and grand. Even the security guard standing at the entrance seemed to have the words, "Poor people and dogs are not allowed in," written on his face. She said that she wanted to buy a gift, so he drove the car here. He heard that the expenses here were very high. No one dared to step in if their monthly income was less than 100,000 yuan. Unspoken didn't think much and walked in. The first floor was mostly for cosmetics and some luxury jewelry brands. Wuxia asked her to wait for him on the first floor, so she wasn't in a hurry to go up to the second floor. Instead, she browsed through the jewelry counters. She wasn't buying, she was just looking. While she was strolling, she suddenly heard a strange yet familiar voice. Unspoken? Unspoken was a little surprised. She looked up and saw that the person walking towards her was her work colleague, Han Xiaoxiao. This Han Xiaoxiao was considered a flower in the office. Not only did she have a hot body, but her facial features were also very beautiful. Before Unspoken's arrival, she had always been like a fish in water in the office. After all, most of the employees in that company were men, and single women were few and far between. Hence, as one of the better-looking single women, Han Xiaoxiao was naturally in high demand and was considered to be the one who could summon the wind and rain. But after Yun Shishir entered that company, everything changed. Yun Shishir was gentle and easy to get along with. Not only was she kind and charitable, but she was also different from Han Xiaoxiao in that she would often help her female colleagues. Hence, Yun Shishir completely stole her limelight. Han Xiaoxiao was extremely jealous of Yun Shishir. Therefore, she often ostracized her. Now that Yun Shishir left the department, Han Xiaoxiao returned to the throne of a princess. There were still many people in the company who surrounded her. A while ago, she developed a private relationship with her superior. She hooked up with such a person, so naturally, she was promoted to the deputy manager of the public relations department. It was the time when she was in the limelight. As a result, Han Xiaoxiao could be said to be very different from the past. She was much more liberal with her spending and often went to some high-end consumer places. Chapter 374. If it wasn't for her good looks, it would be degrading for her to wear cheap clothes all day long. What made her even more jealous, though, was that she did not know what ability Yun Shishir had to be able to make those cheap clothes look fashionable. Could it be that with a good face, one could look classy in any clothes? Shishir, long time no see. It's such a coincidence to meet you here. Han Xiaoxiao swayed her hips as she walked forward. Her movements were flirtatious. I haven't heard much about you recently. Did you find another job after leaving the company? Yun Shishir did not have a good impression of her. Not only did she ostracize her, but this woman's behavior in the company was no different from a green tea girl. Therefore, her attitude was not very enthusiastic. I found one. Seeing that she was so cold, Han Xiaoxiao did not get angry. Instead, she leaned closer to her. In the past, Yun Shishir was always praised as a goddess in the company. However, it was different now. She had hooked up with a big shot. Her status and identity were not what it used to be. Therefore, she wanted to use this rare encounter to show off and show off. Why are you so cold? Are you in a bad mood? Why don't I treat you to a cup of coffee? It's at Blue Mountain Coffee on the 3rd floor. Blue Mountain Coffee was not cheap. It's okay. I'm waiting for someone, Yun Shishir said calmly as she browsed casually at Tiffany's counter. Han Xiaoxiao saw that she was looking at jewelry and stuck close to her like a piece of plaster. She smiled and said, Tiffany's jewelry is a world-class designer in America. It's not cheap. I just bought one yesterday. It's a little expensive, but everyone said it looked good when they wore it. Yun Shishir only lowered her head to look at it casually and ignored her. This woman was so talkative. She was annoyed with her. If it wasn't because she was waiting for someone, she would have gone upstairs to get rid of her. When the salesperson at the Tiffany's counter saw that Yun Shishir was only looking at her without saying a word, she could not help but size her up. She noticed that she was wearing unbranded clothes and looked very poor just by looking at her. Therefore, he thought that this woman must not have much purchasing power. On the contrary, the woman standing next to her was dressed fashionably in branded clothes. She looked rich and respectable. The salesperson took a closer look and saw Han Xiaoxiao standing in front of the counter. Her hand was intentionally or unintentionally fiddling with a necklace on her neck. She was slightly shocked and said in astonishment, "Wow, beautiful lady, is the necklace you're wearing on your neck the Bulgari series?" Han Xiaoxiao's lips curled up. "I bought this necklace a while ago. I don't really like it, and it's very cheap. It's only 20,000 yuan for one. Hee, it makes you look especially elegant. However, I have a series that should be more suitable for you." Han Xiaoxiao pretended to be a rich lady and said, "Take it out for me to see." The two of them echoed each other and started chatting passionately. Yun Shishir was looking at the price signs. She was speechless when she saw the long string of zeros on the price signs. Then, she saw Han Xiaoxiao chatting with the salesperson. It was obvious that Han Xiaoxiao wanted to show off in front of her. She was a little dispirited and wanted to leave. Mu Yaja parked his car and went up to the first floor. He saw that she was standing at the jewelry counter and seemed to have nothing to do. He walked over slowly. "Have you waited long?" Chapter 375. His appearance had attracted Han Xiaoxiao's attention. The handsome man in front of her was tall and slender, especially that exquisite handsome face of his. His every movement exuded a natural aristocratic aura that made her fall in love with him. Who was this man? He looked like he was either rich or respectable. Why was he with Yun Shishir? Han Xiaoxiao's eyesight was outstanding after all. She could tell the brand value of Mu Yaja from head to toe at a glance. Compared to Yun Shishir, who was wearing cheap clothes, it was a little out of place. "Shishir, who is he?" Yun Shishir pursed her lips and did not want to bother with her. Mu Yaja looked at Han Xiaoxiao coldly and lowered his head to ask, "You guys know each other?" "Ex-colleague. We are friends." The two of them spoke at the same time but gave different answers. Han Xiaoxiao's face revealed an awkward smile. "Shishir, why don't you introduce him?" "Her man." Without waiting for Yun Shishir to speak, Mu Yaja said concisely. Han Xiaoxiao was stunned. Even Yun Shishir's expression froze. "What are you talking about? Isn't that the case?" Han Xiaoxiao bit her red lips hard. She was a little indignant and felt that she had been outdone. At the same time, she felt that the man in front of her was a little unreal. How could he be Yun Shishir's man? Didn't he take a look at his background? Was she even worthy? Rich families were particular about matching in social status. How could a commoner like Yun Shishir be related to a rich family? The more she thought about it, the angrier she felt. She had wanted to show off in front of her, but in the end, she felt like she had been checkmated. This knowledge made her extremely displeased. Mu Yaja's palm gently covered her head and stroked it gently. "What do you like? I'll buy it for you." "I don't like it," Yun Shishir said indifferently, but her gaze landed on the display cabinet. There was a pair of exquisite and beautiful earrings in the shape of a five-petaled flower, just like stars in the sky. The name was interesting as well. This was called Stars in the Sky, but it was expensive to make. Mu Yaja followed her gaze and saw the pair of earrings as well. His slender fingers clasped the cabinet's surface. "This pair, take it out." Yun Shishir was a little surprised and opened her mouth. She did not understand the meaning of his actions. The salesperson glanced at Yun Shishir, still feeling incredulous. She would not be willing to let ordinary people. This was especially true for someone like Yun Shishir, who was dressed shabbily. She would not be able to afford it, anyway. But Mu Yaja was different. One look and she could tell that he was of noble birth. Mu Yaja glanced at the salesperson's gaze and knew what she was thinking. However, he did not show it. Until the salesperson presented the pair of Stars in the Sky in front of Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja reached out and took one of them. He reached out and gently brushed away her hair. In an instant, that small and cute earring was exposed to the air. Mu Yaja gently put the earring on for her. The star-like earring set off the pure white earring. It looked even more tender and beautiful. It was as if it was silently tempting him to kiss her. Chapter 376. He lowered his head slightly, and his thin lips that were cold from the night breeze kissed her earlobe. Han Xiaoxiao was stunned, but the kissing scene in front of her was too beautiful. Even she couldn't come back to her senses for a while. Yun Shishir was shocked. Her body moved slightly to the side, and she glared at him with embarrassment. She was obviously shy. Look, do you like it?" Mu Yaja pushed her in front of the mirror and lifted her hair. Yun Shishir looked at the mirror. Although she didn't say anything, her eyes revealed her love for the pair of earrings. Muyaja put the other one on her. The salesperson immediately praised, "This lady looks really good wearing this pair of earrings." "Sir, do you want this pair of earrings?" "Yes." While speaking, Muyaja's eyes didn't leave Yunshurshu at all. He just handed over a black gold credit card. The salesperson was still puzzled. Why didn't this man ask about the price of this pair of earrings? He just gave the card to her directly. Was he so rich? However, when she took the credit card from him and looked at it, she didn't have any doubts. Ultima, the king of the cards. People who had a black gold credit card had a supreme status. In the big capital, there were only 5 such cards. Even Han Xiaoxiao couldn't help but be shocked. He was stunned. He was really stunned. One had to know that a black gold credit card wasn't something that ordinary rich people could have. Who was this man? After swiping the card and paying the bill, the salesperson handed the gift box to Muyaja. The man hugged Yunshurshu and left. Looking at the two leaving figures, Han Xiaoxiao wanted to chase after them. Shurshu, the latter, however, ignored her completely. Han Xiaoxiao was extremely embarrassed. She turned back to the counter and asked the salesperson, "Is that man's card the legendary black gold credit card?" The salesperson's lips twitched, but she said, "I'm sorry, madam. This involves the customer's privacy. Forgive me for not being able to tell you. How much is the earring that the man just bought? I want it too." Han Xiaoxiao pretended to be generous as if she was eager to regain her face. "That earring is the only one in the counter at the moment. It's already gone. But I can tell you the price. It's 990,000. 990,000? A pair of earrings cost 990,000? Han Xiaoxiao's expression stiffened. The toy section was on the 5th floor, but when they reached the 3rd floor, Muyaja held her in his arms and walked towards the women's clothing section. When they arrived at the Chanel counter, Muyaja picked out a few dresses for her. Yunshurshu, Muyaja gracefully sat down on the sofa. "Take it." Yunshurshu said, "What do you mean by that?" "To buy clothes for you." Yunshurshu furrowed her brows and said, "I don't want it." Muyaja didn't allow her to object. He snapped his fingers, and a few salespeople surrounded Yunshurshu and escorted her into the fitting room. He smiled evilly. Throwing a tantrum in front of him? Didn't she know whose territory this shopping mall was? Yunshurshu's protest came from the fitting room. "All of you, get out. Aya, don't take off my clothes. I'll do it myself, can't I do it myself? All of you, get out." The salespeople were all chased out. Chapter 377. Muyaja glanced at it and felt satisfied. He lowered his head and flipped through the magazine again. "Go and change into another one." Yunshurshu changed into a few more outfits. Muyaja frowned. He suddenly realized something. Damn it, this woman looked good in everything. Thus, he stood up and walked to the counter. "This one, this one, this one, and that one, which one, I want that one too. Pack it up." "Yes, sir." Yunshurshu was speechless. Why did he buy clothes as if he was shopping at a wholesale market? Just like that, Yunshurshu finally went up to the toy counter on the 4th floor with bags of various sizes. She had specially chosen a famous toy brand. When she walked out, she handed a beautifully wrapped gift to Muyaja. "This is a gift for the child." She had specially prepared this gift for Xiaoyichen. Muyaja took the gift. She had personally wrapped it and written a birthday card with her heart. Her handwriting was beautiful, and at the end of the card, there was a smiley face. It was very heartwarming. This should be a birthday surprise. After shopping, it was naturally time to fill his stomach. Yunshurshu chose a restaurant, but it was crowded. The waiter apologetically said that there were only seats available in the lobby. Muyaja made a call, and shortly after, the lobby manager hurried over. Knowing that the CEO of Disheng Financial Group had arrived, the manager of the restaurant personally led a group of people to greet him warmly and respectfully. Then, he caught a glimpse of the innocent girl beside him and was stunned. The manager looked at Xianxia with a smile and asked politely, "May I know how I should address you, miss?" Xianxia smiled but was pulled into Mu Yaja's arms. This was a silent announcement of her identity. Since she was CEO Mu's woman, he naturally had to serve her well, right? You can mess with anyone, but you can't mess with women. Especially this important person's woman. Mu Yaja saw the look in his eyes and knew what he was thinking. However, he was too lazy to point it out. He only ordered coldly, "Prepare a table of food." The manager nodded hurriedly. "Yes, sir. I'll get someone to prepare it right away." The manager had specially arranged a room with an elegant environment for them. The elegant lighting, the glass windows, and the beaded curtains gave the room a classical charm. How could he dare to neglect someone of Mu Yaja's status? Moreover, it was an honor for CEO Mu to grace his restaurant with his presence. In fact, this private room had been reserved by a guest at a high price earlier, and it was also scheduled for this time in the evening. Weren't they bumping into each other? However, he had no choice but to reject it. Over the phone, the manager repeatedly reminded Mu Yaja that he did not like noisy environments and insisted on a private room with a quiet environment. Even the most distinguished customer couldn't compare to this one. Even if he offended the other customers, the store manager had no choice but to push it away. Xianxia was so hungry that her head was dizzy. She felt lightheaded when she walked, and her stomach was empty. When she saw Mu Yaja walking far ahead, not caring about the bags she was carrying, she was full of resentment. However, when she sat down at the table and stared dumbfoundedly at the delicacies on the table that were comparable to the Manchu Han imperial feast, her gloomy mood was swept away in an instant. Chapter 378. Just like that, the two of them occupied a big round table with a sumptuous spread of delicacies. Extravagant and corrupt. But at this moment, Xianxia was very willing to be corrupt. Oh my God! She was so happy. But there was so much food. Could the two of them finish it? Wouldn't it be a waste if they couldn't finish it? Hence, she decided that she could just take it away like the last time. Xianxia was so tempted by the aroma that she was drooling. She raised her chopsticks and planned to gorge herself. However, in the blink of an eye, she saw Mu Yaja sitting at the table calmly. He didn't seem to be interested in the sumptuous spread on the table. He didn't even look at it and was casually wiping his hands with a wet towel. Master Mu Yaja was extremely picky in this aspect. He had been pampered since young and lived a life of luxury. Naturally, he didn't care about these. If it wasn't for her. In his eyes, these sumptuous delicacies weren't even as good as the noodles she cooked. Xianxia stared at his elegant dining manners. She thought that he was from an upper-class family after all, so his etiquette was good. He also had a serious obsession with cleanliness. Xianxia despised him in her heart. She didn't care about him. She picked up a piece of beef and stuffed it into her mouth. Her mouth was full and she was bursting with happiness. It was delicious. She was so happy that she cried. She had never eaten anything so delicious in her life except for Yu's cooking. At this moment, there was a sudden sound of footsteps outside the door. Xianxia turned her head with some doubts. She vaguely heard a woman's dissatisfied and coquettish voice. "I had already booked the private room earlier. How could you cancel it just like that, Miss Lin? Don't be angry. You have an important guest. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been pushed away." "Oh? She's a guest and I'm not? What kind of boss are you? Don't you know the rules of first come, first served? You're a businessman, but you're so. All businessmen are evil. Sorry. Next time, there won't be such a thing." The manager apologized. Next time? How can there be a next time? Get out of my way. Don't. Miss Lin, please wait. There's someone in the room. Humph. Don't stop me, I want to see what kind of amazing guest actually took the seat that I reserved in advance. You're quite capable. The door of the private room was suddenly pushed open. This action was too rude and caused too much of a commotion. Mu Yaja frowned slightly and turned around. A layer of frost appeared on his face. He saw a gorgeously dressed woman standing by the side of the room. She was wearing a long black dress and exquisite makeup. She was accompanied by an extraordinary man who also looked very noble. It was obvious that the two of them were born in a wealthy family. Their gestures had a kind of elegance that was unique to the upper class. Seeing this situation, the manager stood at the side uneasily. He was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He looked at Mu Yaja with a smile on his face and secretly looked at the woman beside him from time to time. For a moment, he didn't know how to ease the situation. That woman first looked at Yun Shishir with a sharp gaze. She opened her mouth with a gloomy expression and was about to flare up. However, from the corner of her eyes, she caught a glimpse of the extraordinary man on the main seat. The words that she wanted to say were suddenly stuck in her throat and she forcefully swallowed them back down. Young Master Mu. The woman's red lips opened slightly. She was secretly surprised and her eyes revealed an unexpected joy. Mu Yaja looked at her coldly. With just one look, the woman knew that he had forgotten about her.